So Robin's been asking me to do this demo for a while, and I've been dragging my feet because actually making wooden jaws, it's like, how am I going to fill up, 2, 3 hours of time? There's not much turning involved. It's a lot of layout, drilling, countersinking, and all that. And so I said, well, I mean, without a drill press and a table saw and all that stuff, how am I going to do it? Well, then I saw Raleigh give his demo on mandrels, and he showed how he makes a mandrel, and then he showed how he used it to make your birdhouse. And so I went, oh, maybe I could do something like that. I could show how I make my jaws, and then I can show how I use them by making a plate. And then we started using the audio system and the TV, and then Raleigh came with his PowerPoint presentations. And I thought that's even better yet, because otherwise I'd have to have a bunch of different jaws showing all the different steps to try and explain the steps that I take. And now I can just show you a picture. And I think hopefully the PowerPoint presentation does a better job than me just talking about it. And I can take different angles and all that. So we'll see. We'll see if this works or not. So I'll start off with the PowerPoint presentation, talk about some of this stuff, and then we'll go to the lathe and finish up the jaws and make a plate. This is just some feedback I've received from different people, and any similarity to any, any similarity to people in this room is purely coincidental, but you'll just have to trust me. They really, really did say all these things, right? Actually, I think the only true thing is, yeah, the one in the lower corner, he's not funny. That's my wife. That's the only true statement up there. But all right, so there's enough jokes there. All right. My wife does say I make things harder than they need to be. So I'll show you a couple of simple, easier solutions, and then we'll get into actually making jaws from scratch. Does anybody have an Axminster, Chuck? No. Oh, you do? Larry, if you have an Axminster, Chuck, then you might want to just buy what they call their wood jaw plate. You just remove the dovetail jaws, you screw this metal plate onto the face of your jaws, and then you can run some screws in from behind. That's a real simple way to do it. The lower right photo shows that they're gripping a jaw in compression mode, so they're gripping the outside of a bowl so that they can finish turn the bottom. But if you look at that lower right photo, it also shows like a big rim, a big ring around the outside, and that's where they could expand those jaws and hold the bowl on the inside through expansion. So you can shape your jaws however you want, whatever size you want. You need a different size, just cut a new size recess. Just sit tight. Just sit tight. No, you cannot. Yeah. When I first started being faced with making wooden jaws, I went onto YouTube, of course, and to see how are other people doing it. I wanted to get some ideas, and I don't know if I was using the wrong search term or what, but I could not find one video on how to make wooden jaws like what I wanted. Not one. So, but then I remembered Richard Findlay, if you guys know him, woodturner in the UK. And he has posted on Instagram before. He's posted his wood jaws. I went, great. I went to his Instagram page to look and get some ideas. Well, Richard uses Axminster chucks, and he has the wood jaw, or the flat plate. So Vicmark does not make a flat plate. That's all I own is Vicmark chucks. So I was like, okay, well, those are nice, but I can't use that idea. So YouTube didn't have any ideas. I remembered I did bring it. I remembered an article that I read in the AEW Journal a couple years ago about a guy that made his own jaws. So I went online to the AEW directory, did a search. How do you make wooden jaws? Make your own wooden jaws, homemade wooden jaws. I couldn't find that article. Well, of course, I found it about a month later, and it's called Make Your Own Soft Jaws. And I wasn't using soft because he used the plastic, the nylon or the high density. So anyway, so I was faced with how to make wood jaws. Richard Finley's post wasn't helping, couldn't find that other guy's article. No YouTube video, so I kind of just had to start from scratch and just kind of remember what I read in that article and just kind of wing it on my own, start from the beginning. But if I had had an X-Minster chuck, this would have been an easy solution. One Way sells a couple their own version. They sell a couple of versions of the flat jaw. So for those of you that have One Way chucks, you can just buy one of those flat jaws. They work well. You might even just want to buy plastic jaws. So Vicmark, Nova, Record, they all make plastic jaws. What's nice about those is the holes are drilled already. They're countersunk. They'll fit your chuck perfectly. All you have to do is just cut your recess for whatever size you want. Now, the problem with those is, I think the second one down, the 6-inch jaws for the Vicmark, that's about as big as I was able to find. So it wouldn't work for me because I needed to grab an 8-inch tenon. And if the biggest plastic jaws you can buy are 6-inch, that's not going to work. So, but I do have a set of plastic jaws at home that I'm working on right now. They're not done, or I would have brought them today. But if all you make are birdhouses or boxes or small turnings like that, then maybe that's an easy solution for you. You use those, the plastic? Awesome. Or coffee scoops. Where's Dennis at? Coffee scoops. I mean, that's kind of what you were doing, but I don't know that these are thick enough though either for your coffee scoops, now that I say that. But yeah, but small turnings probably wouldn't work. So all I have is Vicmark chucks. If you own a Vicmark, they make mega jaws, and I didn't bring my mega jaws. Vicmark makes mega jaws up to 9 inches in diameter, and a 9-inch mega jaw will grip an 8-inch tenon, which is great. That's an 8-inch tenon. So I could just buy a set of mega jaws, and I was thinking about it. They're about $140, $145. So that's when I thought, let's see, I got to order them. I got to wait for them to show up. Maybe I could just make something out of wood. Let me just try it and experiment. And that's where I made my first set of jaws, and I've been using these ever since. So, but that's a solution. You could just go ahead and buy the factory jaws. Biggest factory mega jaws I have, did I say it already? There are 7 inches. I thought about buying their 8 and 9-inch, but now you're talking $300 worth of jaws. So Nova and One Way also make bigger jaws for some of their chucks. But again, the biggest that Nova makes is like 6.5, and One Way 6 1/8. So again, those will grip, 5.5-inch tenon, which still is not big enough for what I'm doing here. And then to answer Keith's question, can you use cold jaws? And yes, you can. So everybody makes cold jaws. I mean, different brand companies make cold jaws. So cold jaws are great. You remove those buttons, those red buttons or the little round buttons, whatever. Take those off, throw them away, put them in the drawer. You don't need them anymore. Just take some wood, screw it to the back, cut your recess, and away you go. What's nice about these, first of all, with the buttons, anytime you want to grip something, you got to loosen up the screws, move them to a different hole. Each one of those squares, at least on the Vicmark buttons, it's a different angle. So you got to make sure you got the same angle for all of those buttons. Put them all in the new hole, tighten them down, and then you find out I went too small or I didn't go small enough. And you got to loosen them up, all those screws again, move them to a different hole, etc. Whereas something like this, you just use your chuck key and, oops, wrong chuck key. And then you can just easily open and close them. So they're a lot quicker than the buttons. They'll also grip 360 degrees around that bowl or that plate, whereas the cold jaws, those buttons will only grip in 8 spots. So this is a lot more secure, a lot tighter grip, if you will, than those buttons. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, this is the small set of cold jaws. The Vicmark does sell a bigger set, but there's nothing that says I couldn't have cut wood pieces even bigger than what I've got on here. Yeah, that was just as wide of the piece of wood that I used. Scott.
as a maximum and a minimum. And I've written on mine.
Uh-huh.
So all I do is I measure my plate. It's 13 5/8. I go to that, set my screws and I'm done.
And you're done.
Not big, that's-
Yeah,
this is it.
that is a good tip. I actually had written on this, but I had to peel the tape off to put these on. But I would still get it wrong. So if there's anybody else like that.
I have big jobs, they have metric, but if I measure the bowl, I'm not pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I would always be off and I'd have to change it again. So I think these are faster, I think. Hey, watch it. You just stay in the back of the class, the back of the room there. What else is nice about these is you don't have to worry about drilling the holes and countersink them. You can just use the screw holes in it. So it's a quick and easy. It's like the Axminster plates. Yeah, just screw them on and away you go. Oh, that's a good point. Back on this slide, there is an RPM rating on these or something. These particular ones happen to say 1,000 RPM, so pay attention to whatever your cold jaws are. Now, 600. Now, would you be able to, I don't know about you guys tell me, I never thought that the cold jaws, that the buttons actually gripped as firmly as what I wanted. Have you guys had that problem or experienced that or anything? Yeah. Tailstock support. Do you pay attention to the speed rating on the jaws or just kind of still 600 or 700? So lighter cuts. So why do you guys have the cold jaws? For taking the foot off of the bottom of a bowl or something like that? Yeah. Yeah. And so same thing would apply for this. You could use this for bowls or plates or something. My very first set of wooden jaws that I made, I made them extra thick because I had this idea in mind. Oh, I'm just going to make step jaws for my breakfast, lunch, and dinner plates. Well, it didn't take long for me to realize that's not going to work for me because like my small plate, it'd be down inside the jaws. I couldn't get at it to do what I wanted. So what I've done now is I just have, a separate set of jaws for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know if you guys can see those, but I just made different sets of jaws for my different sizes.
You're actually turning the inside of the plate, not the back.
Right. Yeah, so I grip on the back of the plate with the jaws while I hollow out the inside, and I'll show you that when we get there. Okay, so those are some couple of easy solutions. So thanks to Raleigh's PowerPoint, I have to put up a safety notice. Wooden jaws are not as strong as factory jaws. I don't know how they can be. We were talking wood versus metal. How could they ever be? I don't care what kind of wood you use. How could they ever be as strong as metal? But are they strong enough? I think the answer is yes. Wooden jaws are not as accurate as factory. I don't think they ever could be. I have a drill press and a table saw. They've got state-of-the-art CNC machines that everything is milled with, within tolerances so tight. All those holes are drilled perfectly. They're countersunk exactly the same, milled perfectly. How could my wooden plates ever compete as far as accuracy? Are they accurate enough? I think they can be. But I think the accuracy comes from you guys and how you make them. If you have a hard time drawing a straight line from corner to corner, or if you don't have a drill press, if you can't drill straight holes, if you can't, flatten a piece, if you don't have the woodworking tools to flatten it, join it, whatever you need to, I think you might not be happy with them. So I think all the accuracy comes from you. And you'll see that in my presentation. I'll just kind of drive that point home.
When you turn a plate, don't leave the support in the middle, your rim will sink to you. Does that bigger jaw support that rim better so you have less vibration?
It does. And did you peek at my presentation before I showed it up? Yeah, it does. So that's another advantage. And no, you're fine. You're fine. I'm giving you a hard time. It does. Yeah. I think as long as you use wooden jaws for what they're designed for or within their limits, I guess. Are they strong enough? Yeah. I would never consider using wooden jaws to core a bowl or to rough out a big bowl blank or anything heavy or out of balance. I only use wooden jaws for my plates. And if I am making a bowl, I'll grab my factory jaws. So within that aspect of it, if you stay within what I call their limitations, I think they're accurate enough. I think they're strong enough. But safety's up to you. Use wooden jaws at your own risk. I'll have a disclaimer for everybody to sign when you leave that you don't hold me liable or anything. Yeah. And I thought I made the fonts big enough to read, but I can see they're not big enough. All right, so those are some simple solutions. Now we'll get into how I actually make them from scratch. So for dinner plates, I like to, or any plate, when I'm making my jaws, I like to use a square piece of wood. 9.5 to 10-inch diameter is fine. Of course, if I'm making jaws for a lunch plate, I can use 9-inch and et cetera, scale it down. I just think that using a square piece is easier. And it says minimum thickness between 3/4 to 1 inch. They don't have to be this thick. They don't have to be this thick. Or some of these are thicker than they need to be. 1 inch is fine. But you don't need a 10-inch wide piece. You can glue two boards together. So the top picture there is just a piece of poplar that's 5 inches wide, about 24, 25 inches long. So I'll cut that in half and then glue those two halves together, and then I'll end up with my 10-inch square piece. The bottom picture, I don't know if you can tell very well, but that's a glue up. That's a bunch of shack maple, and it's about 5 inches as well by 24, 25. So you don't have to buy a solid piece of wood. You can do glue ups, provided you've got the woodworking tools and you can do tight glue ups, tight joints. No, good question. Wood preference. So a lot of the jaws that I made for the How class are going to be shack maple. I do like poplar.
Almost like soft.
Yeah, it's a soft hardwood, not as hard as the hard maple. I got an email from a guy in Australia, I think it was, and he said, "I've got sycamore and oak. Which one would you recommend?" I recommended sycamore because that's more like maple, but by the time I responded, he wrote back and he said, "Oh, well, I already used oak and they worked great." So something I've actually, for the class up north that I taught a couple years ago, I used pine because I had scrap piece of pine. I think that's more one use. I don't know if do you guys still have those jaws? Have you used them since? Yeah. So I think it worked okay, but I think something a little bit harder would be better. So poplar. So I think about anything. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't buy it at Home Depot. I haven't looked, but Austin, yeah. So you can get 6/4, 8/4, yeah, 5-inch wide. Austin. I had some pieces at home that were 5, 6 inches wide, and they were 8/4, so that's what I used. And that's why some of these ended up being as thick as they are, because I just didn't want to plane it down anymore. But it's not going to hurt anything. It just doesn't need to be that thick. But just want to let you know you don't have to use a solid piece or anything. You can do a glue up. So I'm going to show you a couple different methods for making the jaws and laying them out on the wood and all that. So first method is just a bunch of glue ups. And so here I'm making jaws for the ladies of the lathe and How classes. I've only got 10 sets pictured here. I think I ended up making about 16 or 18 by the time I was all said and done. And I made them thicker because I'm hoping to get a couple of uses out of them. So the first How class, the jaws, how they're going to get them will be like this. They'll just be flat, and then they're going to have to cut the recess in them for whatever size they need. So after the first class, I'll face those off, and I'll let the second class cut a recess for themselves. And that's why I made the jaws thicker, so there'd be enough thickness there to do that. And that's what you see here, just some thicker blanks. They're probably about 1.5 inches thick. And again, just because I'm hoping to get a couple uses out of them. The bottom picture is just some shack maple glue up. It still needs to be plain, cut to size. And so I'll do that. And that's the end result on the left. I didn't think it would be a problem. The first glue up, I used some shorter pieces for the outside edge because it's going to be cut round anyway, right? Well, then I got all done and I went, oh wait, but I need those corners to do layout from corner to corner. It wasn't a problem for me because I have so many other sets that I can use for doing my layout. But if you guys are only going to make one set of jaws, then get a set, glue up a set where you've got those corners, because that's one of the first things to do is draw a line from corner to corner. Like that. So I've taken this piece, I've glued it up, it's plain flat. I ran it through my table saw, set my fence for whatever the width, ran it through, flipped it, ran it through again. So I got a perfectly square piece. A note about that though, check and make sure that it's square before you do the opposite side, right? I mean, because it could be a parallelogram and the sides would be even, but you wouldn't have a square corner. So anyway, just the point about woodworking joinery and all that, make sure you got a square corner and then run it through. So it's perfectly square. So the next step is to draw a line from corner to corner as accurately as you can, and then from top to bottom and left to right. Those are our layout lines. And this is the big picture, so how we're going to get our jaws out of it. So the 4 quadrants will be our jaws, and then those diagonal lines are laying out for the screw hole locations. Just big picture type stuff. Okay, a note on factory jaws. Factory jaws have a raised rib on the back. You guys have probably all seen that. And they have that for alignment, strength, accuracy, whatever. The very first set of jaws that I tried to make, I tried to mimic that. And I didn't do a very good job mimicking. I had my calipers out there, I'm measuring. The jaws would open up just so far and then they'd bind up. And I messed around with that. I measured again. I shaved a little bit off here, a little bit off there. I couldn't get them to work. So I threw a temper tantrum, like Greg says, and I shaved it off. And I said, let's just what happens if I just screw this in place without that? And it works great. That's how all of these are made. And the caution about that though is because we don't have that rib, you got to make sure that the back of your jaws is flat. So now we're relying on those screws to hold the jaws in place on the slides. You got to make sure that this is flat so you have a nice, good, strong contact. All right, the next step is to lay out the mounting holes for the screws, mounting screws. Very first one that I did, I tried measuring the distance between the screw holes with my calipers, and then I would draw it out, get my compass, draw it out, and that way works. But then I finally said, why don't I just use the jaws themselves to lay out the screw hole locations? Yeah, as a template. Okay, before you draw your holes though, notice in the upper left corner, I've got some little pieces of wood. And I don't know if you can tell in that picture, those are just little scrap pieces of plywood that I use as spacers. And I'll put those in between the jaws before I draw my circles. And what that does is it gives a little bit more room between the edge of the jaw and the screw hole. Because remember, this is a solid blank, we're going to cut it in half, so we're going to lose that thickness of the kerf. So otherwise that screw hole would be even closer to the edge of the wood than what it is. So I started using the spacer, and then I'll lay out my my holes. I use a rubber band to hold the jaws together in place. The left photo just shows I have a rubber band around the jaws. The right photo shows that I just have it around the outside of the jaws. And either one of those methods work. And then you can just visually align the holes with your diagonal lines. And you'd be surprised how accurate your eye is. And just line them up until the diagonal lines come right through the center of those holes, and then trace them out. The centering pin, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. That's a pretty big wide, I don't know if my centering pin is at
Like them in
three different sizes. I'll have to check that. That's a good, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, yeah. I'll have to try that.
Yeah, that's another thing.
I know what a Brad point. Oh, that's the center punch for like laying out for hinges. Yeah, for hinges. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks. Brad point, if it's the same. I don't, I don't know. Yeah, it would have to be the same size as the inner hole. Yeah, yeah, that would work. A little bit trickier.
Also, when I put with, place by doing it, they make these little double stick tape dots that wrap themselves. I use those on a lot of things to hold things in place while I'm I do hinge or something like that. I'll put those dots on the back of it and then it'll hold, temporarily hold that.
Oh, okay. So on the back of oh, that's a good idea. Great ideas. A lot of stuff. Word of caution that just because you have rubber bands doesn't hold them completely round. They can still shift on you, but you'll know if you don't have a completely round grip because your diagonal lines will be off. You won't, you'll have a couple of holes that they're off a little bit.
Working thing you could use, if you put masking tape down and then put glue on that.
It'd be hard to get things centered. Yeah, that'd be my only concern is, yeah, do you have it centered before the glue sets up, or would the dots still allow you to shift it and get in position and then you push down to hold them? Yeah. All right, so now that we've got our hole locations, the next step is to start drilling the holes. The left photo just shows that I'm testing the diameter of drill bit that I'm using first. So I just have a scrap piece of wood, I drilled a hole through it, and then I'm going to take the screw, and I want that screw to just fall down through that hole. I don't want to have to push it. I don't want to have to screw it. You're never going to get a tight joint if you have to screw the hole down or push it. So I want it to fall down without any slop. And that's what I'm doing with that left piece. The right photo just shows, like I said, I made a template when I first started, and I tried to measure and draw lines and all that kind of stuff. And really, I just bring this for show and tell anymore. I don't necessarily use this method anymore. What this is handy for is checking your screw, if the screw holes are lined up right, and if I set them on my jaws, so you can use this to check the spacing of your holes. If this is accurate, then you can use this for setting up the drill press, the fence, and the stop, and all that kind of stuff. So, but otherwise, I don't really use this too much anymore. But it's a idea, it's a thought. No, I'm getting there. You can, but you probably want to buy longer screws. Yeah, that's coming up. Yeah. Oh, how about right now? We'll start talking about it. Let's talk about the screws that come with your jaws. So again, I have Vicmark chucks. So Vicmark, the smaller VM100 chucks, they use M5 screws, and then the bigger VM120 uses M6 screws. The Nova G3s use an M6 screw as well. I don't know about one-way screws or anything like that. I don't know if other Nova chucks still continue to use the M6. I would imagine they would, just for consistency. Record uses M6? Good, I didn't know that. The Vicmark, the small Vicmarks use an M5 screw. I use a 13/64 drill bit to drill my through holes with. That will let the screw just fall right down without any slop. The bigger Vicmark and the Novas, they use an M6, and I use a 1/4-inch drill bit to drill those holes. If you're not familiar with the metric system as far as screws, I have a little small chart at the bottom that you can hardly read. The M stands for metric, the 5 or 6, M5, M6. That stands for the diameter of the screw in millimeters. And then you'll see a 0.80 or a 1.00, and that's the thread pitch, or the distance between threads in millimeters. And the last number, the 16, the 20, 25, what have you, that's the length of the screw in millimeters. So Vicmark, the VM100, the standard screw length is 12 millimeters or a ½ inch. And then the Vicmark, bigger Vicmark VM120, it's a 16 millimeter or a 5/8. Why is that important? Because you're probably going to want to buy longer screws, longer than ½ inch or longer than 5/8. And how do you know how much longer? Just wait another slide or two and I'll tell you. Yeah, Dale.
I brought cookies for everybody, so.
Oh,
There's.
I didn't hear you, but I smelled them. No, I didn't.
Get some too, but then,
All right, so now that we've tested that we're using the right size drill bit, now we'll go ahead and set up and start drilling our holes. This is where you got to use a drill press, you got to use a fence and a stop block. I would not even try doing this with a hand drill. You're not going to get straight up and down holes. So set a fence and a stop block, and I'm going to drill the inner holes first. And then I got a red caution that says, make sure the piece is clamped down. I don't have a clamp in that picture, but trust me, clamp it down. Clamp it down tight. And here's where I use a brad point bit. Somebody else mentioned a brad point bit earlier. I like to use a brad point bit because I'll bring it down and let that point touch the blank, and it'll make a little divot mark on my line, and it'll tell me, am I lined up with my line? Am I centered within my hole that I drew? And it just is a lot more accurate than using the 30-degree standard drill bit, which is hard to see. Use a brad point bit, and so why do I drill the inner holes first? First of all, a little bragging right there. Perfect. Oh, didn't I mention that? Why do I drill the inner holes first? Because I want to make sure that the jaws come together in the center, in the point. If you drill the outer holes first, and now you need to try and make adjustments with the inner hole because they don't quite line up, you might not get it to come together tight in the center. But I start with the center and work my way out. So I drill the first hole. Because I have a perfectly square piece, I just rotate it 90 degrees, drill the second hole, third hole, and so on. Finish drilling all those holes. Okay, after I've drilled all those through holes, don't touch the fence or the stop block. The temptation would be, let me just go ahead and set up and drill those outer holes since I have that brad point bit in there. That's the way I did it on the first one, and believe it or not, it's not as accurate when it comes to later steps. So don't touch the fence or the stop block. I'm good. I can't eat when I'm on video, but I appreciate that. Later. Okay, sorry. Lost my train of thought with the cookies. Yeah, you're fine. Thanks for bringing them. So, okay, drill the inner holes first. Now take that drill bit out and put in a countersink bit. And the reason you want to put in the countersink bit instead of, again, I thought it would be easier to let's just drill all the through holes first and then let's switch to a countersink bit. The reason you want to switch to the countersink bit now is you'll never get that fence and that stop block aligned perfectly the way it is with the holes. And if down the road, then when you go to countersink, if you're off just a smidge, that throws the screw off and the screw holes won't line up right. So remove the brad point, install a countersink. A little note that factory jaws are about, at least the jaws that I've got, they're about 1/4 inch thick. And if you can see in that lower photo, see my little red circles? It shows that the jaws are about 1/4 inch thick, but there's only about 1/8 of an inch of metal underneath the screw head. Now these are metal. I'm making wood. I think I'd like more than 1/8 of an inch of metal underneath my screw head. So I'm going to buy longer screws so that I can have at least 1/4 an inch of wood underneath that screw head. Over time, that wood's going to compress, and if you don't countersink it consistently and evenly, it compresses, and before you know it, remember, the only thing holding these wooden jaws in place are the screws. And if you just have a little sliver of wood under there, how strong are they really going to be? So I like to have at least a 1/4 inch of wood underneath the screw head.
Use the brad point to start it or go all the way through?
All the way through.
And then go ahead and swap out the counter.
Right.
Okay.
Use a brad point drill completely through holes, and then switch to the countersink and countersink the holes without touching the fence.
They take it on and off your check, or do you make them, leave them on the check and you always use them until you need to replace them?
I do both. Either or. I've got like 11 chucks, so I can leave a lot of them just set up the way they are. But there are times when I want to use a factory jaw, so I'll just take these and remove those jaws. Yeah, so. No, but over time doing that, you could end up, depending on the wood you use and all that, that's when you could end up compressing that wood a little bit more. Might change it a little bit, but I've got, like I said, I've got a 1/4 inch of thickness underneath my screw head. I haven't noticed any problem with that at all. Yeah. Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't like having this, until I've finished same operation for everything.
Okay.
So I was thinking you could, potentially take the brad point bit, flip it upside down or leave it either way. And use that to realign first hole as you drill.
I tried that. You'll be off. Trust me, you will be off. It'll be off just a little bit. And so that countersink, you know, makes angled.
No, this is
Sli-
before you do the counter.
Okay, so
You
say,
said that do the brad point bit and then switch to the countersink and do the counter.
No.
I'm saying, I don't like to have to do that.
drill all four of the, right,
Then switch to the counter thing.
right,
So realign, you said the problem was you couldn't realign
right.
if you moved it. So I'm saying to realign.
Oh, use the brad point bit.
Upside down, so it's just a alignment tool. Stick it through the hole and get your fence and everything set up
You-
again, stop block, align.
You let me know how accurate that works, because that's kind of what I tried doing the first time, and I used it. Yeah, I do it this way. It's a lot more accurate. My countersink is exactly centered on my through hole. It's not off just a hair. For me, it works. But you know, not trying to be a smart aleck, but try it your way. And yeah, but I tell you, if you're off half a hair, it's so hard. Once you got that fence set up and it's perfect, I don't want to touch it.
Without a fence or anything.
Oh, well,
So I'm much more accurate.
yeah.
It seems like,
You don't have a drill press? Oh.
I didn't have a fence or stop.
Uh,
I just.
my fence was, I don't know if it showed it in that picture. My fence was a piece of wood. My fence is a piece of wood I clamped, and then you can clamp a block of wood for a stop or something. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I just happen to use a piece of wood. Yeah, I just happen to have a little L bracket because it was right there. So who else had a question? Scott? Oh, good idea. And let me,
That screw would be into the wood, if you're doing that like 40 feet, you want that down, you're gonna need to drill another hole to drop that countersink down. Screw down in, so you can cut that dovetail out.
so my countersinks are 82 degrees. That's the only one I own. But with this, I can drill down an inch or however deep I want. I have to keep retracting the bit to clear it, but
Your secondary drill.
this is my second hole. Yeah, so I use a brad point bit to drill the through hole, and then I switch to this countersink to countersink all of them. I can pass this around if you guys want. Yes. Oop. See?
Buy it, Harbor Freight.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a set with different diameters,
Yeah, that's.
but I never paid attention to what the angle was until Scott. That's all I had, so that's all I used too. Any more? Okay, so yeah, drill all the through holes. My method, don't touch the fence, switch to your countersink the holes. Again, so there's a 1/4 inch of metal underneath the screw head on a factory jaw. I set mine up so there's a minimum of there's an 1/8 of an inch on the factory. I drill so that there's a 1/4 inch of wood, so I buy 1/8 inch longer screws. Dennis bought, 2 inch long screws, so he's got a lot more meat under his screw head than what mine are. The reason I countersink mine as deep as they are is because then if I ever need to face this off and make a different size, I've got the wood and the screws are plenty low below the head. And then there's your another little chart on the M5, M6, just, millimeters, 12, 14, 16. And I just buy them an 1/8 of an inch longer. You can buy them at Home Depot, but Ace Hardware was actually a lot cheaper. So, and the type of screw you're looking for is a socket flathead. That'll give you the same type of factory screws. Dennis. Okay, so our goal is to countersink the holes until the screws extend, no matter what length screw you buy. The goal is to countersink the hole until the screw extends 3/16 to a 1/4 inch beyond the bottom of the jaw. So measure your one-way, measure your Novas. My Vic Mark, my small Vic Mark, the screw extends just a little bit less than a 1/4. For my big Vic Mark, it extends just a little bit more than a 1/4. So whatever protrusion your factory screws extend, that's what I'm trying to match with my wood jaws. And I'll just keep countersinking slowly at a time and just keep checking until I have the right protrusion. Go slowly and frequently, stop to check for the correct protrusion, and then set your stop on your drill press so that you can countersink all of the rest of the holes. Just countersink one, get it right before you try and do the other 3. Because if you mess up, you've only messed up one hole instead of all 4 of them, right? If you go too deep, you can buy shorter screws if you still have enough wood left remaining. Otherwise, just glue in a plug, glue in a dowel, and try again, drill it again. And for those keen observers, should have made that print smaller so you couldn't read it, but for those keen observers, I'm actually, this picture is showing an outer hole, but remember, I'm still just drilling the inner holes. I just forgot to take a picture. All right, so now I've countersunk all 4 of those. I've drilled the inner holes completely through, countersunk them all. I've checked my depth. Everything looks good to go. Notice I got a clamp. That really is important. Keep that clamp for accuracy as well as safety. Yeah, Steve.
Another thing that I tried was they also sell, you call these flathead, sorry.
Socket flathead.
They socket screws that that's what they were called. But they're metric and they're square. They're flat. They're a thicker head, but they have a flat bottom.
Oh, without a taper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I tried that too. So you could potentially use that and then not use a taper and then I haven't looked to see if they make small enough washers. You might be able to put a washer.
Washer under there too?
Make it so it doesn't compress the wood as much.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Just have to have thickness.
Thickness.
Blank to compensate for that head height.
For whatever size, yeah, for the type of screw you're buying. The reason I just bought these with the taper is because that's what the factory ones were, so.
I
But-
just saw those.
But yeah,
There.
oh,
Same sizes.
as long as you take that into account when you're drilling and countersinking your hole, whatever type screw. Yeah, thanks. So now that I'm done with the inner holes, then it's rinse and repeat and do the outer holes. So readjust your stop block in your fence, line it up for the outer hole. I've switched back to the brad point bit. I bring the bit down, make a little point in the wood to check my alignment. And this is where, if you made one of these to start, this is where you could use this, like what Steve was saying, use your brad point bit and check your fence and hole setting, if you had made a template. Otherwise, just line it up with with the diagonal line in your hole that you, your circle that you made. Drill all 4 of the outer holes, drill one, rotate it, drill it. Make sure you clamp it down for each hole that you're getting ready to drill. Okay, now we're getting ready to countersink, and we're going to countersink 1 hole. And I've switched to the countersink bit. After I countersink the outer hole, and again, I'm checking my depth, protrusion, and all that stuff. Forgot to mention it on, so switch to the countersink bit and double check your depth setting, because you've switched bits, right? You took, okay, and I thought that was going to be the easier way to do it, but it wasn't as accurate for me. So you've switched, and I put the counter. So I've drilled all the outer holes. I've taken that brad point out. I've put in the countersink bit again. That countersink bit that's being passed around, it actually has a shoulder on it, so I can just put that in until it bottom, hits the jaws. But I still double check my depth. If you have a different type of countersink that just has a long shaft or something, then just make sure you double check your settings as you're countersinking. So I've countersinked 1 outside hole, and now I'm going to take that 10-inch, 9.5-inch, whatever, square piece of wood over to my jaws. I'm going to set it on here, and I'm going to make sure that both those screws that I've just drilled and countersunk, make sure that they go into the jaws. If they don't, I'll adjust the outer hole, okay? Because I've set up those inner holes so that those points come together at the center. If both screws do not line up, I make adjustments to the outer hole. If I have to drill that hole a little bit bigger, so there's a little bit more movement, a little bit more adjustment, I'll do it on the outside hole. But that doesn't affect how they come together in the center, because that's why I do the center holes first. So now's your time to make any adjustments before you go ahead and drill the rest of those holes. The upper left, yeah, that's that quadrant. That one has got 2 screws in it. So that's actually a picture showing, I didn't show the underneath side, but that's my 10-inch piece is screwed to my jaw. Yeah, I've got longer screws. I've run them down, and they both just slide down and screwed right in without having to force it or anything like that.
See the screw head, I thought you were telling us to check your depth, because if you don't, you get too big of a hole.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, no, those black circles are the screw heads themselves. Thanks for mentioning that. And then I tested those, they worked fine. I went ahead and countersunk the other holes, and I'm all done. So if everything lines up from those 2 screw holes, go ahead and countersink the rest. And you tested the fit before you went and did the rest of the holes. You tested the depth of those countersinks, and now the next step is cut those apart. So remember, I'm working with a square piece of wood, and I've drilled all the holes, countersunk them, reset, drilled the outer holes, countersunk them. Now I'm ready to cut these apart into 4 jaws. So I've got it set up on my table saw. I've got the fence set up. I got 2 pictures here. The right picture is just showing, looking over the top, and you can see I've drawn that line down the side. I got the fence set up to where that saw blade's going to cut right down through that line. Before you cut this apart, if you haven't marked 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your 4 different quadrants, be sure you do that. Because everybody knows, tell me if nobody knows this, but jaws are marked with 1, 2, 3, and 4, right, from the factory. And it's important that we maintain that same orientation, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And everything is set up so that, all my holes are drilled with the grain going a certain direction, the wood a certain direction, and all that. When I eventually cut those apart and put those on my jaws, on my chuck, I want to maintain that same grain orientation. I don't want to mix these jaws up, or they'll never come together in the center, or you'll have a gap between jaws.
When you said initially when you were laying that out, use a 1/4 inch spacer between making the jaws.
Just
Why didn't you use an 1/8 inch since the 1/8 inch, it's an 1/8 inch curve on the blade?
a 1/4 inch just gives a little bit more, all that does is gives a little bit more room between the hole and where it's going to be cut apart. I could have used an 1/8 inch, but that would have just meant that these inner holes were even closer to the, I don't know if the camera shows that, but there's probably not even an 1/8 of an inch between the hole and the edge of the jaw. So if I used an 1/8 inch spacer, that would be, I'll just stop. I mean, there's not much room there between those holes. That's the only reason. I could have used, I guess I could have used, if I used anything bigger, then you wouldn't have enough room for those jaws to actually come together tight. But yeah, good question. So yeah, the point before I cut this apart, make sure you mark 1, 2, 3, 4. Vic mark starts, goes counterclockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nova goes the other way. So just, and I didn't realize that until I had marked all these jaws, but just make sure you mark 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's what those red circles are showing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Another note, it's important to maintain the same orientation when you cut these apart. So we've got a solid block of wood. We're gonna cut it in half. We're gonna have 2 halves. What the yellow arrows, which you don't show very well, but what those yellow arrows are showing is maintain your same orientation when you go to cut these halves in half. So meaning if you rotate them this way, rotate them both this way. Don't rotate one way and one the other. Because if you're off just a little bit with your fence, if you're not cutting exactly in the center and you run them through this way, they're not going to come together. So if you rotate them both this way and cut them in half, rotate them both this way, cut them in half, just maintain that same orientation. And that's the end result. So I've cut those apart. Moment of truth, test fit on your jaws. So there's a screw in each of those 8 holes. Those jaws are screwed down to my chuck and I have a good fit. I've maintained my grain orientation from left to right in this example. Everything comes together tight in the center. Everything lines up great. This is a result of not maintaining that same orientation when you cut the halves apart. So you can see I've got a little bit of a mismatch in the center. The jaws are off centered a little bit because I wasn't exact. When I cut this set, I didn't have my fence exactly. And we're only talking maybe a 32nd. That's how much they're off. It's not much, but for a guy like me, it drives me nuts. And that's my OCD kicking in. It doesn't matter because the gap between the jaws themselves is still tight. So that little mismatch in the center won't matter in this case. Because I haven't cut, they were, but I haven't cut those yet. I haven't trued those up yet, but yes, they are. Yeah, I could have used a thin kerf blade too. Didn't think about that, but I have one. Yeah, good idea. Okay, quick note about grain direction. How am I doing on time? Oh, way too long. A quick note about grain direction. Both pictures are showing a different layout for my jaws. I've got them both laid out on that 5-inch wide by 24, 25-inch long board, and you could lay your jaws out a couple different ways. The blue lines are showing how I would cut it apart, how I would cut the wood apart. So in the top picture, I could just measure in, for example, if I have a 5-inch wide board, I just measure in 5 inches, cut it apart. Measure in another 5 inches, cut it apart. And I would end up with 4 square 5x5 pieces of wood that I could use for my layout. The bottom picture shows that I've drawn 45-degree angles, and I'm going to cut pie-shaped jaws out. And I'll cut pie-shaped jaws out. So some people will tell you that, and I got a slide coming up in a minute here that might explain it better. Some people will tell you only do it the bottom way. I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, exactly. Long grain versus end grain and holding power. So the top photo, I'm just going to say right off, when those jaws come together, because the grain is all going the same direction, when those jaws come together, I'll be gripping that tenon with end grain and side grain. And if I do the same thing with the bottom jaws, I'm only gripping with side grain, so I get even pressure. I got another slide that might help explain that too. This is just, again, just showing grain direction. Okay, maybe this will help a little bit. So the glue up on the left, thanks,
That's a good slide.
thanks.
Well done. A little transition. I thought I'd call you out on that.
So the glue up on the left, the red lines, of course, are where the joints are going to be, you know, the edge of the jaws. The blue lines are the clamp direction. So you can see on the left picture, as those jaws come together, I'm going to be using end grain and side grain to be clamping around that tenon. So that could cause uneven clamp pressure. But the picture on the right, it's always going to be side grain, which will give you more even clamp pressure. I'm here to tell you it doesn't matter. I have not noticed any difference at all. All of my chucks have got the grain going the same direction. For what I use these for, I have not noticed any difference at all. Yeah, well, yeah, my plates are not very big, very heavy. I haven't noticed that much of a problem, so I say do it whichever way. I find it easier to use a square piece to do all my drilling and holes instead of 4 small pieces running around. This piece I don't know if it shows it in the camera, but this piece I did do the grain orientation like that, just because I knew somebody was going to ask me about it, Greg. And but again, this was my first set of jaws. All my other set of jaws, you can see the grain just goes up and down, and they work fine. Yeah. And then this was the second method that we've kind of talked about already, just laying it out at 45-degree angles. Again, make sure that you mark your jaws 1, 2, 3, 4 before you cut them apart. Okay, so I'm getting ready to, I've got a piece of pie jaw that I'm getting ready to drill up, and it not clamped down, so what could go wrong? Well, what went wrong is I drilled the hole, and as I'm retracting the bit, I wasn't holding it tight enough, and the piece of wood came up with the drill bit, and it kind of egged out that hole. Anybody ever had that? Never, right? Had I kept lifting and this thing cleared the fence, now this is jammed on that bit, and this is spinning around at 1,000 RPM, so that's dangerous. So clamp it down for your safety, and clamp it every time for every hole, especially when you're countersinking with that big countersink bit. When I'm getting down there 1/2 inch or whatever, oh yeah, does that baby want to raise up? So make sure it's clamped down tight. I don't know if it doesn't really show it, but on my drill press table, I've got T-tracks for those clamps that you can buy. You know, those little, what I'm talking about. Those didn't work. The piece still lifted up on me, so I stopped using those, and I got a big F clamp, you know, a big Bessie clamp, and I tighten that down, and I make sure that thing doesn't move. So anyway, what happened, when retracting the bit, I wasn't tight enough. It made an egg-shaped hole, so I ended up drilled it out bigger and just glued in a dowel. I had a 1/2 inch dowel, so I just drilled a 1/2 inch hole. And that's much better. So you can see I'm getting ready to countersink. I've got it clamped in place. And if you look closely at that, you can see that all 4 of these inner holes I had to drill and plug, because not only was it not clamped down, but I forgot to tighten the table height knob. And each hole that I'm drilling, that table was moving just a hair. And I didn't realize that until I drilled all 4 inner holes. So I threw another temper tantrum, and then I drilled them all out and plugged them with a dowel, re-drilled them, and clamped it down, made sure everything was tight. So it might not be pretty, but it'll still work just fine. All right, so now we're all done. Cut the corners off at the bandsaw, and then the rest is done at the lathe. And there's some of the jaws that I've been making for classes. So those of you that are taking the classes, next week, this is what you're going to be given, something like this. And you'll have to do the rest yourself.
We obviously don't want to mix map all the jobs. So how are you keeping them organized?
So I've numbered each of them with 1, 2, 3, 4 for the jaw position, and then I wrote A, B, C, D. So A1, A2, A3, A4, B1, B2, B3. I have bought those for you. I spent my own money buying longer screws for you guys. I have M5 and M6 longer screws. So M5 for you Vicmark users and M6 for the Nova users. I take care of you. I got your back, Scott. That's right. Don, did you hear that? I filed this under nice to know. In the course of doing all this, I borrowed a Nova chuck from the ladies of the lathe cabinet so that I could get the hole spacing for making all my jaws. And then just, I don't know how I ended up, but I just put a Vicmark jaw on top of the Nova chuck, and wouldn't you know, the holes lined up perfectly. The jaws are not interchangeable. Remember that the Nova uses M6 and the Vicmark uses the M5, but I thought that's nice to know that the hole spacing is the same. Next time I don't have to borrow a Nova chuck. I can use my own jaws to check out the spacing. I didn't know that. Are they? Yeah, I did. All right, so now we're all done. Final steps are done at the lathe. So we're going to mount the jaws on the chuck. So we'll mount these wooden jaws on the chuck, paying attention to jaw number 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll true up the outside edge in the face if it needs to be. Optional is to drill a little hole in the center. For those of you taking the class, I've already drilled the hole and I've already trued up the outside edge to save time in class. And then last step is to carefully measure and cut a dovetail recess for whatever size recess you need, for whatever size you need. So what size recess do we need? Well, it depends on what size plates you're making. And for those of you in the class next week, depends on whatever size plates you make. And that's the size recess you're going to cut. So first we need a plate to know. Robin asked this question at the monthly meeting last week. Yes, Chris was making a bowl and he was talking about the foot that he makes, and Robin asked, what size foot do you make? Is there a formula, I think is how you worded it. Is there a formula for what size? I don't know if it's a formula, but yeah, there is some guidelines. So on a bowl, a foot on a bowl should be about 1/3 of the overall diameter, 30 to 35%. I think that's pretty much established diameter that people go by. A platter should be a little bit bigger, 50 to 70%, and then a plate should be even bigger yet, 65 to 85%. So with the plate, we want to, did I bring one of those? Well, with the plate, you need a wider base of 65 to 85%, so that if somebody is stabbing a piece of food or cutting a piece of food out towards the rim, you want to make sure that you have support under that. If you have too small of a base, if you have a 50% base and you stab something out here, that plate will tip on them. Right, Jessica? I'm picking on her. That's right. So I'm giving her a hard time. So yeah, Jessica's plate won Bear's, best plate award. And so, I mean, plates are, I kind of get into plates. So I went over there to see, well, how come yours won instead of mine? And yeah, no. Yeah. So, but I gave you a comment. First comment that I gave you was what? Your foot is too small. Base is too small. Your base was probably about 50%. And I pointed that out, and her comment was, I know, it keeps tipping on me. So, flinging fruit. That's, so plates need to be 65 to 85%. I make my dinner plates 10.5-inch across. So according to this, I should be making a 6.5 to 8.5-inch diameter foot. I'm sorry, we're in the wrong line. 6.8 to 8, we'll say 7 to 9 inch diameter. I make my plate foot 8-inch. So that's why I needed to make 8-inch mega jaws so that I could grip my 8-inch tenon. That's how this all started. That's how I got started with the jaws. I decided to do a different base. I think I used to make plates with a recess. I'll talk more about that. But everybody does a recess. I wanted to be different. So I started making them with a tenon instead. My tenon is a bead that my foot is a bead that I've disguised as a tenon. And so I was kind of working through things on my own. And so I said, okay, great. There's my foot. There's my base, my tenon. I don't have any jaws big enough. What do I do? Do I spend $145? Do I make my own? And that's where you end up today.
Taking the class. We can still bring a 12-inch round. I mean, that's not too big or.
If you can cut it down just a little bit, to 11 and a half, yeah, that would fit on those lathes. Well, those will take up to 12-inch, but I mean, you would have to have it perfectly centered. It still could hit the bottom of the, yeah. So if you can go 11 and a half, and then you can make an 11-inch plate, by making 11 and a quarter, however size you want, yeah. For those in the class, I've got blanks from 9 to about 11 and a half. 9, 10, 11, 11 and a half, something like that is what I've got. I can send it to you and then you'll send it to me so I can send it out. So yeah, I can make it available. Oh,
You don't send it to Oak Club unless you want us to.
no, because they won't. Okay, I'll send it to you and you can send it to everybody in the class.
Expect them out. Send me an email so I know. Send it to.
Oh yeah, Dennis. That's why I texted you yesterday, Dennis. I didn't see you on the sign up and I wanted to make sure you remembered to come today. All right, so that's fine. That took 45 minutes longer than what I thought it'd take a half hour to go through that. All right, so now the final steps are done at the lathe. So I'm gonna mount the jaws on my chuck. If you guys need to take a quick potty break while I do that. And I guess you got to keep the filming going, otherwise you can't splice it together, can you?
You mind if we put this on YouTube?
Oh, no, I don't mind at all.
I want your for just.
Yeah, public is fine, because
For the next person searching on how to do it.
they'll find something. There'll be one video on YouTube for how to make wooden plates. That's okay. Wood turners share their knowledge, don't we? We are free to share our knowledge. So Robin, just for your information, so that's a factory jaw, 1/2 inch, and then I just bought 5/8,
Okay.
a little bit longer. Yeah.
You're gonna be famous after this.
Am I? I'm not now.
I kind of called you out when he said,
I-
you're going to be famous.
I can give you my autograph now if you'd like. Yeah.
Would it really matter to add a little more space between the edge of the screw holes? Or to get a little more space around the edges of the screw holes? Would it really matter if you had a little bit of a gap, bigger gap or some gap between all those pieces?
Well, I think then they might not come down tight enough, because your screws would be, if you had too much gap, your screws would be out here and your jaws would never come together.
Why do they have to come together completely?
Actually,
That's the fundamental question, right? Why do they have to actually come completely together?
because you know what, as I think about that, if I had more space in between the edge of the screw, they would come together, but they would come together sooner. Yeah. I guess that would work.
We can make it a little beefier.
When you cut the recess, do you put a spacer back in so that you get the same thing as like a full job? Or do you cut it with it clamped down with all the pieces?
I'll talk about that. I don't. Because,
That's what really matters, that they need to come together real nice, that sort of.
yeah, but a little bit like on this one, I mean, that's my first one. That's not tight, but it doesn't matter because I still have to cut this. And that's tight enough.
Yeah, I'm not thinking about it.
But see, then as I got better, my gaps got better too. Pretty impressive, isn't that? I'm pretty impressed with myself too. That's right. Oh. Yeah, I'll get to those in a minute. So the first thing I need to do is make a plate so I know what size recess, and then I'll show you how to set those up and cut a recess and all that.
That's when it's clamped down. You just need to make sure your plate is like oversized that way. But you don't have any wiggle.
You do if you cut the recess smaller than it needs to be. That's yeah. Oh, you should have brought your award-winning plate. But it's sitting on your lap, so it'll be all right. All right, do you want me to make a plate out of a glue up? Or out of piece of elm or piece of maple? The glue up, elm? That's more elm? That's how I am able to chainsaw them now. That's when I first started chainsawing. Now I'm getting that kind of result. That's pretty impressive, isn't that? I used a bandsaw on this. With a fence. Yeah, no, that's my chainsaw. That's my bandsaw. No, honest. That's really how I do them. All right, so what did you want? Glue up? Doesn't matter. It was a big triangle piece. Yeah, I had a big flat. Oh yeah, never try and resaw something round. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to use a glue up. I glued up some plates just specifically for my demos and for my classes and stuff because didn't want to use any of my other stuff because it takes a while to get a buildup of plate stock and then to let them dry and all that. So I only sell solid plates though. So this plate right here, this is going in our home. I would never sell that to a customer. I only sell them solid pieces of one-piece plate. I know there's guys that will sell glue ups. I'm satisfied with my glue up. I use the right glue. I use tight joints and all that stuff. But I make stuff to last for years. And could I have a joint fail over time? Probably not, because I do a good job with my glue up. But I mean, it's possible. But the other reason I would not do it is even if I used all maple instead of maple and cherry, the wood can contract and expand at different rates. And over time, you're going to feel a joint, or you could feel a joint. And that's not good enough for me. I don't want customers to complain 5 years down the road, my plate is rough. They're not going to say that about a solid. So I have this for demo purposes only. I'll probably bring one of these to the holiday party to see if I can win something. Maybe I'll make a new one with Purple Heart stripes and Bubinga and all that, but This is only about inch and a half wide. Those people it's about an inch and 3/16. So you might have seen people make plates before or platters, and it's real common for them to use a screw chuck, a screw center, or screw a faceplate to this. And that's how I've done it for years. This blank here, you can see I used to use a recess, and this one had a faceplate on it. This had been sitting in my garage for 10 years because it has a goober in it, and I just haven't decided what I want to do with that goober. So I first learned how to make plates, or I guess I should give, not first learned, but Mike Mahoney is the one that got me started on plates. I took a class with Mike in 2010 at Craft Supply, one of his 5-day courses. And one day during class, he invited all of us students to his house for lunch. This is when he lived in Provo. Hey, you guys want to come see my shop? It's like, out of my way, I'm driving, Heck yeah. So we went to his house, saw his shop, saw his pile of roughouts, heard stories about pieces in his personal collection, from different turners and stuff. And if that wasn't enough, then we ate pizza off of plates that Mike had made. And that was a real joy for me. And I don't think Mike owns a store-bought plate. I think everything he's got is wooden. And these plates, you could tell they were well used, well loved. They had, beautiful patina, probably had some food stains, maybe marks, dings, whatever. And that pizza never tasted so good, I tell you. And Mike said a couple of things during lunch. He said a couple of things that have stuck with me. One thing was, what better way to impress friends and family than to serve them a meal off of a plate that you've made? And that stuck with me. And then he said he hoped if he ever was invited to any of our houses for a meal that we would eat off of plates that we had made. So it's challenge accepted. I went home, cut up some plate blanks, let them dry, and we've been using wooden plates in my house since 2011, the following year. And no, Mike has not had a meal at my house. He was close. He almost did. One time we just couldn't. I was trying to get him, when I was president, trying to get him out here for a demo, couldn't make the timing work. But I have had Glenn Lucas, Kirk DeHeer, Christian Breeze Pierre, the owner of Woodworkers Emporium, as well as family and friends. Dennis and Robin have both eaten over at my house. I invited both them over when Glenn and Kirk were in town, and we ate off of plates that I had made, and wasn't that extra special? So impressing friends and family, right? So I think it's great. We don't use wooden plates every day in my house because I do dishes, and it's easy to just throw something in the dishwasher. If you count my dessert plates, those do get used quite often, I will say that. So I've got more dessert plates than I do dinner plates, but probably at least a dozen. But they're all different shapes and sizes because over the years I've tried different styles and stuff. So I tried different rim widths. I put a bead on the outside, bead on the inside. Of course, they had a recess and stuff. I've got some real nice fiddleback maple that's been down in my basement for years, just waiting for me to finally make a match set. So, but I've got dinner plates. I've probably got at least a dozen. Dessert plates, easy another dozen, and then not so many lunch plates. But I make 3 different sizes: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, yeah. Wash them in the sink with your other dishes. Soap and water, scrub them. Then when you're all done, just set them up, prop them against another dish to drip dry, or just hand dry them. Yeah. The joke is you can put them in the dishwasher one time, and then you have to make more. Robin, you made a set of plates for your camper, didn't you? Put them in a camper when she goes up in the mountains. So, yeah. But yeah, wooden plates are great. More antiseptic. I've had a customer tell me it's quieter as well. That it's quieter to eat off of, and it's like, great. You want to buy some more? But my dinner plates, I have not needed to oil them again. Just the first time. The dessert plates, I've done those once. So in 13, 14 years. Hell no. Heck no. No. No, I don't use mineral. I use either Danish oil, which is the longest lasting. That's why they've lasted so long. Or else I use for probably about last 5 or 6 years, Odie's oil. And if we have time, I'll show you Odie's oil. That's why this plate has got, that's why that has finish on one side but not the other, because I'll oil that for you if I stop talking. All right, so you guys have probably seen people make plates before or platters, and again, they'll use a screw center or a faceplate, and those methods work fine. That's how I did it for a number of years. They work fine as long as you have the thickness, okay? But this is what I say, this was 1 3/16. So you might be a little bit hesitant to run screws in here for faceplate and stuff. So the way I do it now is I mount it between centers. So I have a step center in the headstock. I have it in my chuck. I could have just put it directly in the headstock, but this just saves me time, and it also is useful for something else. And then I have a revolving center in my tailstock, but I remove the point from the revolving center because that point will make an indent in the wood that I've got to remove later. And again, if I don't have the thickness, that can come into play. This just flat, yeah. So I've marked the center. I don't use, what did you call that? The spring-loaded thing? Center punch. I don't use that because then again, that makes a point that I've got to remove later. So I just marked it with just a Sharpie. And I'll just line this up between centers. This piece, of course, is all nice. The reason I bought this is what all my plate blanks look like downstairs. They're chainsawed. I cut them around on the bandsaw and then I wax the outside edge. I used to do the face. I don't do that anymore. It's a rough surface. It takes a lot more anchor seal or greenwood sealer to do a rough surface than it does a smooth surface. And I'm usually doing this at the end of the day and I'm tired. And I'm just tired and it takes too much time. Haven't really noticed a problem with only doing the outside edge. And you can you guys tell this one's going to have some nice figure in it? Can you see that ripple in there already? But again, I've just marked the outside edge. I've got plenty of thickness on this one. I try and chainsaw them 1.5 to 2 inches. I got plenty of thickness if I wanted to use a faceplate or a screw center. But what I would do with this is I would look at it and I would say, okay, I got a bark edge right there, maybe a crack, a knot, whatever. So I would orient that to the bottom. And when I shape my bottom profile is just a simple curve. When I shape that bottom profile, that'll get removed. That knot will get removed, the crack or whatever. So I would make this the top. On this piece here, it doesn't matter, of course, but that's how I reference things on the rough cut. All right, so either side, top or bottom. I don't have any bark inclusions on this. So I'll just line that up. And now I can just kind of spin that and see, is it running true? Oh. Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Raleigh. It's running true. All right, so what was that? Probably. I'm going to give myself a little bit more room here. All right, so that's just pressed in place. First thing I'm going to do, so I told you I would, how I determine which is the top or the bottom. If I had that blank, this would be the bottom, this would be the top. First thing I'm going to do, because I don't have a screw center or a faceplate, I'm going to turn a quick tenon on the top so that I can turn it around and grab it in the chuck. So this method, and even if I had a big thick piece like that, I still do it this way. I just changed to making a tenon on the top. So I'll show you that real quick. The other reason that I've got the stub center mounted in the chuck is I'm going to eyeball the diameter or the size of this chuck when I make my tenon. So there we go. That's only about 600, but it's starting to vibrate a little bit. So we'll just leave that. So I'll just eyeball how big that is. And I'll just say somewhere around in there. God, I really wish I could do a little bit more speed. But I'm just gonna push in, get rid of some of this wood. Right, I have dovetail jaws, so I need to create a dovetail there. And you guys, can you hear me all right with this? Okay. And here it is. So I just use a skew, I use it as a scraper, and whatever angle that skew is, good enough for me, and I'm just gonna push in, create my dovetail, but then I grind all my skews flat, so I need a flat surface right here for the jaws to rest up against, right? So I just create my dovetail. And then, sorry, do you guys mind if I take my glasses off? I had cataract surgery and I haven't got new glasses yet. And I actually, my distance is perfect for like this. I can still see you guys, but now I can see what I'm doing too. Okay, so I just create a flat. And then I'm going to check that flat. That needs to be a flat surface. I just take a ruler and stick it up against it. I can see I'm not quite flat. But what I'm looking for is to make sure that that ruler is parallel with the ram. If that ruler was sitting flat and it was angled like that or like that, I'd know that's not good yet. Let me just, it's flat, but it's, I'm sorry, I just need to go a little bit flatter, get rid of a little bump there. There we go. Okay, and that'll work. And I've eyeballed that. I hope I eyeballed it good enough. Okay, so we'll take that out of the way. Now, we talked about in the PowerPoint presentation, I talked about grain direction, and for those jaws and stuff, I've gotten in the habit of when I go to mount the piece on the chuck, I make sure that the jaws, that there's a gap up and down, straight up and down, and then I line the wood up and down. And that way, when those jaws come tight, I'm getting equal pressure on my tenon. If I was to do it like this, have the jaws going like that and the grain going up and down, that's when you can get uneven clamp pressure that can cause this to get off a little bit. I just push in the center, tighten it down. Oh, look at that, perfectly sized. That's amazing, isn't that? All right, this is the bottom. So that tenon will get removed when I hollow out the inside of the plate. Yeah. The amazing rack. It's yeah, but see, I have a clamp under here, so it's cantilevered off to give me space. And then I just added these holes not too long ago where I can, put my wrenches, it works real good when I'm drilling my pepper mills because I'll have different size and I can just slip it in right there. Yeah. There you go. All right, so now the next step would be just to flatten this off a little bit. Again, if I had a rough piece like that, I just need to flatten it. It's not my final finish. I just need to make it smooth enough so I can make a pencil mark. And let's just see how this is. That's 670, it's starting to rot. So I just do a quick cut. Did you see how consistent that was, a cut all the way over? That tells me I got that thing lined up so good. All right. So now going back to that chart, how big a foot should I make? Well, this is going to be this is right at about 11 inches right now. So when I get all done, I'm going to make a 10.5-inch diameter plate. Did I tell you that story of why I make 10 and a half? I used to make 11-inch plates because typical dinner plate size is 10 to 12 inches. And so I used to make 11. Well, and we store all of our dinner plates in the upper cupboard, you know, kind of with the two doors and it got a center style. Well, one day I needed to make more room for dessert plates, so I wanted to take our dinner plates and move them more towards the center, and they wouldn't go. They were hitting the back of that stile. The distance from the stile to the end of the back of the cabinet is 10 3/4 of an inch. And Maya's making plates at 11-inch. Well, you can't make an 11 3/4 inch plate because that'd be a suction fitted, always, you know, rub the side of your plate. So now I make 10 and a half inch. So now those 10 and a half inch, they'll scoot over towards the center. I shrunk my rim width down by a little bit to compensate. So my 10 and a half inch plate still holds as much food as my 11-inch plate. And it's more storage friendly. Some guys you'll see, they'll make a 12-inch plate. Ooh, that sounds nice. And they put an 1.5 inch border around it. So that's only 9 inches of food, if you think of it that way, that it'll hold. And my plates hold about 9.5 inches. And I can store them better places. So make whatever size you want in class and at home and all that. So my 10.5 inch plate needs to 8-inch foot. That's what size that I'm going to make. It needs to be 65 to 85%, and an 8-inch foot just happens to be right around 74, 75%. So right in the middle. A couple different ways you can do that. You can just measure out from center. So if I need an 8-inch foot, then I'll just measure out 4 inches from center. 1, 2, 3, 4. I make a mark. And just double check it. That's a little bit bigger. That'll be all right. Okay, and there's my 8-inch foot. That's one way to do it. Another way that I do it, when I was coming up with that chart, is I found out if I round this out first. So let me round that edge. So this measured about 11 inches, so I'm going to take off some wood and make it 10.5. I'm going to do this left-handed so the chips go that way instead of hitting me. Maybe you can from the other side if you're worried about blowout. If you want to check and see if it's round, you can put your tool up against it, right? Everybody knows about that. If you feel like you have to touch it with your fingernail instead of your finger. You're not going to get a splinter on your fingernail, but you could hurt yourself if you get a splinter with your regular finger, or with the flesh part of your finger. So if this is still a little bit rough, we'll just take this down a little bit more. So that's round. Let's see what diameter we are. Like almost right there, like just a hair off. You might get, like, I don't know if the camera shows it or not, but you might get a little bit of tear out on the end grain, no matter if you're using a solid blank or not. So a couple of things you can do to alleviate that is you can go to a smaller gouge. So I was using do it this way, which works best for you, Larry, like that. So I was using my big 1/2-inch gouge to try and to rough that out. If I switch to a 3/8 or a 1/4 inch, it's a smaller gouge, takes a smaller cut, less of a chance of getting big tear out. So that's one thing you can do, is go to a smaller gouge. Another thing you can do is speed up the RPMs that this spins. And then the third thing you can do is slow down your feed rate. So using a smaller gouge, a little bit faster spin, a little bit slow, feed rate will give you a lot cleaner cut. I've adjusted the tool rest so I'm sighting down on the raise, so I've got it parallel with the raise. I'm gonna stand right over the top and look down here because I'm gonna make that a straight cut and it kind of angles just a little bit. I don't know if I'll be able to get the speed up too much with this lathe. So I'll have to rely on a slower feed rate and a smaller gouge. I don't like that bounce. There we go. So it's only going at 560. I really would like it to be more around the 800 or something like that. It's hard to maintain that cut there. Okay. That'll work. All right, so we're just half a hair over 10 and a half, which is fine. That gives me a little bit of room to sand and end up at my. Yep. It's vibrating. Yeah, and if it's vibrating, that's going to be tough to get a clean cut. So I started to say, I forgot to grab a tool. Oh no, I grabbed it. I think, yeah. So I started to say there's a couple of different ways to mark out the base. One of them was just measure out from the edge. The other thing I found is, and this is just purely by coincidence, is that once I have my final diameter, if I just measure in 1.25 inches from the rim, that gives me my 8-inch base. And it doesn't matter what size plate I'm making with breakfast, lunch, or dinner. If I measure in, once I get my final diameter, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, measure in 1.25 inches, I get the perfectly sized foot for that plate. So this is how I normally do it, but you can do it either way. In class, we'll probably have to do it this first way because I've only got one of these. So, I mean, if you guys want to share it, that's fine. All right, and so the only reason that we faced off the front to get it smooth was so we could mark our foot. Now, here's where a lot of people now at this point, they would create a recess to make their foot. And this is where I'm going to change things up. And instead of a recess, so they'd make a recess that they expand jaws into. Well, I want to do something different. So now I make a tenon. My tenon is actually a bead. I should say my foot is a bead that I disguise it as a tenon, and that's my base. So the way I make my bead is I use a beading tool. And there's different ways you could make a bead. You can use a skew and scrape it in, spindle gouge, point tool, different tools like that. I like using a beading tool because it's quick, it's fast, and it's consistent. So when I'm making a set of plates, the foot is going to be the same on that whole set. The way a beading tool is just a scraper. It's used with the flute pointed down. So I take the flute and I rest it on the tool rest. It's used with the handle down like this, and really it just is going to scrape that shape, that bead. That's the size of my foot, so I'll line up the outside of the beading tool with it. And as a scraper, you can't just push it straight in. You got to kind of wiggle it a little bit so that you can cut that curved profile. My left hand is just holding it down tight on the tool rest. And then as it cuts wood, I'm going to wiggle the handle back and forth a little bit, but I'm also going to slightly raise it as I'm cutting. This is a D-way. Yeah, I have 3 different sizes. I'll bring all those to class. So just back and forth as you scrape and cut the bead. And I'm slowly raising the handle. Now, if you guys can see, can you see the little flat spot on the top of the bead? I don't know if the camera focuses in on that, but there's a little flat spot there, of course, because it was a flat surface. Once that flat is gone, then I've gone full depth on the bead. This is 5/16. I've got quarter to quarter, 5/16, and 3/8. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah. But this one works fine for the dinner. This is the medium size, but it works fine for dinner too. This is just the one that was in this handle, so I said that'll work. Okay, so I'm back and forth. I'm slowly raising it. And right there, the flat spot is gone and I just made my foot. Now, and you could get that actually cut really well. If you have any rough spots, that actually looks really good. Maybe a little bit right there. What you can do, raise the handle up even more, and now the edge is going at a downward angle, so it's more like a negative rake. And just real lightly, just scrape the bead. And a lot of times that helps improve the surface if it's rough. So the next thing to do, we only want the plate to sit on the bead. So that means I'm gonna have to remove some of this wood and some of this wood. And right now it's a little bit high there, but I still need to remove some of this other wood. So a couple of things you can do. We don't want to hit the bead. So if I could do a pull cut and start trying to remove this wood, but I stand a chance of hitting the bead with my tool, right? So what you can do is you can just rest that bevel up against the bead and do a push cut. That's one way. So I'll just rest the bevel up against the bead. I'm not cutting the bead. And now I can cut that wood. All I want to do is just remove some of this wood to make sure that the bead is the high point. Now, a little note of caution, if you continue pushing, you could get some pieces that chip out and they'll hit your hand and that kind of hurts. So you can you can get rid of it this way. All right, now let's remove some of this wood in here. So I could do the same thing. I could rest the bevel against the bead, just swing it around, pick up some wood, and do a push cut towards center. I can do a pull cut. If you're doing this, though, of course, you got to stop so you don't hit the bead with the flute. So those are a couple of different options. Let's see how I'm doing. So I'm still high in the center. Let's just get rid of some more of that wood. Oh, there we go, 769. That's the other thing I've noticed about the glue up is the wood density between the cherry and the maple. It's different, and it even at home it vibrates more. Whereas I don't have that problem with the solid piece of wood. So pull cut just removes wood faster. Now I need to remove that little stuff right there so I could put the bevel against the wood, just swing it around and just kind of scrape it away. That's one way. And again, I'm just trying to make sure that the bead is the high point, which I am right now. All right, let's see if we can do something better with that. I like to shape my base so that it's just a real gentle curve. And an advantage of that is if I had a recess, I would be removing wood, right? I would just be removing wood from the bottom of the plate. So I try to maintain that curve and maintain that mass in the bottom so that I don't go through the bottom. So I showed you a couple different ways. I could do a push cut. I could do a pull cut. The way I've but the way I do it nowadays is I use a bottom bowl gouge. And if you guys are familiar with that, what's bottom bowl gouge doesn't have a swept back grind. It's got more of a straight up and down. The wings are brought back just a few degrees, 5 degrees or something like that. But versus, my 40 or 45 degree bevel angle, whatever. And it's used more with the flute in an upright position. So because of that grind, the wood is going to come, and I don't know if the camera will show this, but because of that, the way that flute is shaped, the wood comes down, and it comes down at such a sheer angle that it just comes off with light. I don't know if you guys can see that. It just comes off with just real light cuts, light curls. There you go. Check that out, right? So it's not a bulk removal tool, but it's more a finesse tool, I guess. Works great for, they call it bottom bowl gouge, so it works great for the bottom of bowls, but I use it for the bottom of plates. And I can use this a couple different ways. Oh, and also if you have a problem with tear out, that's where this comes into play also. Because that wood is coming down at such a sheer angle, you don't get tear out. This will remove tear out. So I could do the same thing. I could push it towards center, but I've gotten in the habit of starting at the center and pulling towards me. Now at home, I have a dust collection hood right there. So I don't use the handle, but with, this is the Stuart Batty tool, this bolster makes a good handle for me. And I've got more control just because I start at center and work towards me. I've got more control this way instead of this way if I had a handle on it. So I'm just going to pick up that cut in the center and I'm going to push that tool towards me. And again, it's just taking light cuts. And if you've got tear out, give this a try. So I don't know if the camera will show that. I'll try and keep my finger out of the way. You guys can't see that. So I like to have a shallow curve. If it's flat right in the middle here and then it curves, that's fine too. The way to get the curve is as you're pushing it towards you, just bring the handle towards you and that'll make the edge cut into the wood deeper. The key to using a bottom bow gouge is a slow feed rate. So if you get bounce, you can hear that bouncing, just stop. Just stop and let the wood get cut and then go ahead and continue on. Otherwise, if that doesn't fix it, you have to back up and so you can see I got a little line. You got to back up and get underneath that bounce. Go back there, try and pick it up again. Come on, pick up. See if I can get, come on. Do as I say, not as I do, right? So I'll gradually, slowly bring the handle towards me. Of course, you got to make sure you don't go too far, too hard. You're running into the bead. So that's not very good, but that gives you the idea. And usually I do a lot better than that, but I'll show you how to fix it. So
To a line to cut to that is a little farther away from.
well, you could do that, but I don't own a square end scraper. But what I do use is a skew. And so this little ridge next to the bead, I'll use my skew to scrape that. Now my skew, you're probably not gonna be able to tell, but that first, like maybe 3/16 is flat. And then I start my curve. And so the way I use this is, and if you've got, you can see I got some lines there and stuff. So I'll use this to get rid of those lines and curve. So I like the skew because the point of the skew gets right up next to the bead and I can remove that. And then I can use the curve part and push the handle away from me and cut down that whole edge. I'd be using that whole edge of that skew as I scrape this smooth, get rid of any marks. So scrapers need to be on center. I've already checked that. So I'll come in right next to that bead. And I'll get rid of that little mark. Okay, and now to get rid of the rest of those, I'm just going to push this along the tool rest and I'm going to gradually push the handle away from me, which will make the cutting edge follow that curve on the skew. Get rid of that line a little bit more. So this works good if you've got humps and bumps and like I said, tool marks like that right there. Just go slow, let that cut that out. And I'm kind of going a little bit fast there, and you can go the other direction too. And so now I'm pulling the handle towards me to use that all along that edge. Right up into the bead. Nice smooth surface. So what I'm looking for when I put my ruler on here is I'm looking for a little gap in the center, and then it should taper out and give me more gap towards the edge there. That actually is more gap right there than what I like. So if that happens to any of you, just cut your bead a little bit deeper. Because I try and maintain that thickness in the bottom of the plate, right? I'm pushing pretty hard because I'm trying to hurry up here. A little bit more. And you can even speed things up even more by removing some of the bead. Ooh, they were cooking now, 998. Gets past that vibration. It's too fast for this though. Go until that flat spot is gone. Right there. So I like to have like about a 1/16 of an inch. Oh, that's much better. Just a little bit of clearance there, and then it's a nice smooth curve and gets deeper down there. But now it's still only just hitting on the bead. I still have a little bit of clearance there, so I'm good. So my bottom is done, except for right here. So now I'm going to mark for my height, and this is where guys in class, if you have an 1.5 or 2 inch thick piece, if you need to make adjustments, you've got more wood to work with and all that. So my dinner plates, I make them 1 inch tall. I make my lunch plates 7/8. I make my dessert 3/4. So I try and everything is proportioned from the bottom of the bead. Make a mark. Yes.
But I asked you, but I made a new friend from the Etsy site. His name is Scott.
Hi, Scott.
He's not a member yet. So be real nice to him after I leave. And I'm hoping he joins because he lives in the Timbers, which is right next to me, the Pinery. So maybe I'll have a ride down. Anyway, this is Scott, everybody.
Hi, Scott. That's my last name. Yeah. Thanks, Dale. Thanks for bringing cookies.
Take these home.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm just gonna take one. Thanks. If only we had a dessert plate. That's right. By the way, this was a new shape that I started to make. Let's see if I can show that. You see that, just that gentle curve like that? Did any you guys know what, I'm going to ask this question for those coming to class next week. Look at your plates that you have at home in your cupboard and see what size they are, measure them, see what size they are, see what kind of shape, what kind of profile they are, and you can try and duplicate that in class if you want. The shape I'm going to make today. So the shape that I'm going to make today is going to be just a curve right here, a cove. That's the opposite way. So what I've done, so I marked my height of 1 inch from the bead. I like to make my plates 1/4 of an inch thick. So I came down 1/4 of an inch and made a mark there. So now to make that curve from the bottom to my bead, all I have to do is just shape that curve, right?
You're just doing a plain curve, not an OG.
I don't do an OG, and I know Glenn Lucas likes to teach an OG. I do a curve because it's quicker to make. It's well, faster. That's the same word. It's easier to make than an OG, and it's easier to sand. So easy to replicate too. Yeah. And I made so I've taken Glenn's class 4 times, Mike Mahoney's class once. I took Jimmy Clue's class. We made platters there. But in Glenn's class, yeah, we made plates with the OG. And I hope Glenn doesn't watch this, but when I got home, I took my plate and I made it into a cove because I don't like an OG. An OG also makes it thick. When you go to, the thing about my curve is wherever my angle is, but when you go to, with the curve, you go to grab it. First of all, that curve gives your fingers a place to go underneath the plate to pick it up. With an OG there, it feels thick right here. Your fingers come in and they hit that OG, but then it just feels thick right here. I got a 1/4 inch, I got a 1/4 inch, and I got a 1/4 inch in the bottom, 1/4 inch all the way through it. What's that? It is a good look. Thank you. Somebody take a bite of my cookie there? No. But yeah, it's easy to make, it's easy to replicate. And all I have to do from the bead to the bottom of the plate is just dish it out. And you can do your push cut again. You can practice your push cut. Pull cut is faster, removes wood faster. Hang on, sorry. So when I make the curve, I have the tool planted against my hip, but all I have to do is just swing my hips, right? I'm not doing this with the gouge, I'm doing this with the gouge. And so basically it's just pivoting on that on the tool rest, shaping that curve. And you can take a pretty big cut. Now, because this is going to be a tenon that I grab in my jaws, I got to get rid of that, right? Because I got to have room for the tenon to grab onto. So how do I get rid of that? I use my skew. And I'll just push the skew up, rest it up against the bead, and I'll just bring it around and flatten that down a bit. And I could use, the gouge again to get rid of some of that. But because I have that little flat spot at the beginning of my skew, I can just create a little flat spot like that. And then we need to make sure that it's flat. That's perfect. Do I want to go deeper? I'll go just a little bit deeper. Whatever the diameter is of the bead, I try and go half of that, because really that's a half of the bead, so I try and give a little bit. And remember, I'm going to grab onto that with my wooden jaws, so I want to make sure I got enough wood there to grab onto. So I'll just cut that a little bit deeper. Oops. And that should be not quite flat. I want it to be flat or just ever so slightly tapered inward, just like that. You probably couldn't even get a piece of paper in between there, but I can see that that's flat. So in the PowerPoint presentation, when I talked about the jaws, that they're as accurate as you are, this has to do with that. Those jaws need to have a flat surface right here to grab onto, right? And so if you can't cut a flat surface right here, you might have some issues with that.
Outside, the depth on that inside, so it's actually holding more than just a bead, it's holding a little deeper into it.
The depth is actually a little, just a hair more on the inside, hair deeper on the inside. It's just very slightly. It's flat. It's flat or it's tapered in a little bit like this. Because above all, I want the jaws to be sure and register against a flat surface. So that surface is just very slightly tapered in like this, okay? And everybody knows if it was tapered this way, it wouldn't give enough. Now, all I've done at this point is just created my bead. I haven't created a dovetail yet. So let's create a dovetail. So again, I got that little flat spot. So I'll just come in. I rest this up against I'll rest the skew up against the flat spot I just created, and I'll just push straight in. And because that's got a little bit of an angle, that's my dovetail. That's my dovetail, just like that. No, I still have to sand that, but that disguises that. And yeah, you're not gonna see that. You'll never see that bead, that dovetail. That dovetail is 16th, maybe. And that doesn't need to be any bigger than that if that surface is cut true and flat, and if everything is, and if the face of the jaws, once I true these up, if those are cut flat. Okay, now that I've got that flat, let me just finish shaping this real quick, and then I'll put the jaws on. I don't need that whole flat surface. I can get rid of a lot of that. I can switch to a smaller gouge, and I'm almost at my line. So for me, an eighth of an inch is good. For those in class, if you want to do a little bit wider, that's great. So I just did a pull cut, and I can look at my profile right there. I can see that that's amazing. I probably have some tool marks right there. So I'm going to use just a curve scraper, and I have a tool mark right there. I just use a curve scraper and just clean that up, refine it. Negative rake scraper. I mean, this goes either direction. Still got a line right there. Let's get rid of that. There we go. I think that got it. How's that? Beautiful. And Jessica talked about what I put it? Where'd I put it? Well, what I was looking for was my, oh, right there. So I'm done making bottom of my plate. What's nice about a tenon like this, or a recess, with the recess, they have, they create a recess that they expand their jaws into. Either way, this way or the recess, once you sand this up, you can apply oil and you're done with the plate. I like that aspect of it where it's mounted once and then it's mounted twice to do both sides. When I make a bowl, I use a tenon, but then I have to mount it a third time on a vacuum chuck or those cold jaws or something to remove that tenon. But because I've disguised my tenon as my finished product, I like this for the speed. And I have a production turner's mentality. What can I do to save a step and all that? So this is one way to do that. To sand it up, I use a little 2-inch disc. That will just hit that curve nice and easy, so it's a lot easier to sand than an OG. I'll power sand this, but remember, since that has a curve, you have to follow. You can't just keep your pad flat the whole way. You have to tip it up as you get towards the edge to sand into that curve. Do not power sand the bead though. You have to hand sand the bead. If you try and power sand the bead, I mean, this removes wood quickly and you'll create a facet or a flat spot, or you'll distort the bead just like that. And don't ask me how I know that. I thought I can do that. Oh man, I messed it up. So I had to recut it, and now I just sand it. And I just use, you guys all save your old sandpaper, right? So I'll just take a 2-inch disc, I fold it in half, and then I can just sand the bead like that, sand the inside. And I go through the grits 120 up to 320. I just sand up to 320. And I'll sand the bead by hand and power sand those, and then I'm done. This remains, right. If you sand that, if you have a little bit of tear out and you sand that, just when you get all done sanding, just come in real lightly with your scraper, skew, what have you, and just touch that up and just to make sure that it's flat. Okay, so now at this point, we're done with the bottom. I would apply finish, and now I would turn it around and grab it in the wood jaws, which is why you all came here, and hollow out the top. So I've already measured this. We know that that's 8 inches from outside to outside. So let's go ahead and mount our wooden jaws. What's that? Outside. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because the diameter of the line that I draw was 8 inches, right? Okay, so, all right, while you guys were eating lunch, I mounted the jaws on my chuck, but they're loose, right? So when you do that, when you mount the jaws on your chuck, don't tighten them down right now. Bring them together just till they touch. So you can see, just bring them together till they touch. You don't white knuckle it, just till they touch, and now tighten your screws. I do the inner ones first, again, because I want the points to come together. Oops. You can see how that brought that down a little bit more flush. Okay, and then I'll do the outer ones. Oops, I'll get that. Oh, thank you. Ah. Okay, there. So now they're flat, or now they're all tightened. Now there might be a little bit of a bump right there. So first thing students will have to do in the class is flatten this up a little bit. Because now remember, I'm going to cut a recess, and this surface needs to be flat to fit up against the flat on my plate. So I can either cut the outside surface now, which I've done for the students already, or flatten this up. So again, this has to do with how accurate are these jaws. Depends on how flat you can make that. Now I'm just doing this for right now, but I don't necessarily need to worry, is it perfectly flat yet? Because I still have to cut the recess. That's true that this outside edge, just so if I touch it, it doesn't hurt my hand. Another gouge. I'm not measuring this diameter. I just want to get it smooth. So if I touch it, like I said, it doesn't hurt your hand. Come on. Oh, there we go. We're about there. knock those corners off a little bit. Because I have a habit of doing this, so that's why I want that smooth. And if you want to sand that, go for it. Okay, now a moment of truth. Now we need to measure and cut our recess. So we already know that we have an 8-inch diameter tenon that we need to grab. So I'm going to make a mark. I don't want to make a mark. I don't want to cut an 8-inch tenon right now because these jaws are completely closed and I would never have any grip then to grab onto that tenon. So some people will tell you that you need to put a spacer in between these jaws. So you could get a piece of plywood, 1/4-inch piece of plywood, which I brought, but you get the idea. Put a piece of plywood in between the jaws. Other people will tell you to put a dowel in the center and grab onto the dowel. You don't want to grab the dowel with the jaws. You want to grab the dowel with the slide. Okay, and then tighten it down. So tighten it down on your spacer, tighten it down on your dowel. Or me, I do it all the way closed. And what all three of those methods do is it gets rid of any backlash in the gears. It makes everything solid. So to cut my recess, I like to have this jaw. I like to size these jaws so that when it's grabbing a plate, that the jaws are opened up about 1/4 of an inch. And what that is for then is it gives me room for my calipers to fit down in between the jaws. And these are Martel calipers. And if you look at them, they're not really figure 8 calipers. This leg is a lot flatter. And what that lets me do is I can stick that down in between the jaws and measure how deep the bottom of the plate is, or the bowl, or whatever. And this would be for hollow forms or something else. This is the smallest size that they make. Martel makes a medium and a large also. You have about somewhere around a 6-inch depth, and my dinner plates are 10.5. So even a 12-inch plate, I could still use these. The next size up, I think, measures 9-inch. I use those for platters. And then the large sizes, literally, they're probably about this big. They're humongous. Trent Bosch just came out with his own version of something like this. I haven't seen them. They might work. I think they're about the same price as these. I buy these from he just came out with some newer sizes. I don't know what sizes they are, but he just, like, within the last week or two, they're on his website, the little bit larger size. So they might work okay. They have one difference that I've noticed is the end of this jaw, it comes up, but then it has a little hook right there. So I think that hook would probably still work, for measuring the 12, 16, and 20. And I think these are probably considered the 12. Well, yeah, 12 and a half. And what are they, like $50, $60, 35? Oh, these were like 50. So, and then the medium Martel is 100 or 95 or whatever. But so I like to. Oh, okay. Yeah. I make more plates and platters, but so I use this one more. All right, so I like to size my jaws so that I have about 1/4 of an inch gap. So that means I need to have in this position, that's when I need to have my 8-inch circle, right? Easy way to do that is don't draw an 8-inch circle, draw 7 3/4. And then when you open it up 1/4 of an inch, you'll be at your 8 inches. So what's half of 7 3/4? That'd be like that'd be 3 3/8. Make a mark. That was 3 3/8 for you guys that didn't answer my question. And now, and double check 7 3/4 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope, not even. I'm an inch off. I did the math wrong, didn't I? What's the answer? What's half a seventh? That'd be 3 7/8. That was the wrong way. Yep. Because I was gonna say that's a lot of meat that I left out on the backside. Oh. Got it. Take me down a notch there now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 3/4. All right. I did. Walk right into that. It's actually somewhere around in there. So it made it darker so you guys can see it. Okay, now we got to cut that recess. So I've got these jaws clamped down tight. So that's how I get rid of the backlash. I don't put a spacer in there. You can if you want, but this seems to work just fine for me. And then I just take, I don't have a, Bob asked, why don't I use my square end scraper? I don't have one, but I have a beading and parting tool. I have a Bedan. That's the only square things that I've got. So what I need to do is recess this far enough so that when this bead is in those jaws, that the bead does not bottom out on the bottom of the jaws, just like regular factory jaws. Well, that means that I need to recess this about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch, but we'll check it. So in class, we can just use the diamond or the square scrapers that they've got in there. If you don't have something like this, I think my tour is just a little bit too high. How am I doing on time, by the way? How many? I have 35 left. Oh, that's a big one. I can see that even without my glasses on. Those holes. Now you know why I countersunk those holes so I don't hit them here, right? That's the other hole. I just got this Bedan. I'm still getting used to it. It's a little bit more aggressive than I'm used to. There we go. I'm I'm pushing hard, so I'm trying to hurry also. Don't go all the way to your line just yet. No, I try and just go flat all the way across. I've gone deeper right here, but now I'll bring the rest of them to match. But you could go deeper, it wouldn't matter, but it's that curve is still above the bead. So for those of you in class, this is what you're going to be doing. Whatever size foot you made, you'll size your recess to match. I gotta say, cutting poplar isn't that noisy. But I was kind of pushing it too. Okay, so I gotta bring the edges down a little bit more. Now, back to what Robin was saying, is the middle deeper? it doesn't matter. Where it really matters is the actual tenon right here, because that's the part that's going to be sitting up against the bowl. So that's where we really need to make sure it's flat. I just like to make the whole thing flat. That's just me. But if I'm just a hair deeper in the middle, that's fine. Just one more time. Right out here. Perfect. Okay, now we go ahead and cut our dovetail. And so for that, I'll use a skew again. I have just have a different skew, smaller. This one is ground straight across. So now I'm going to sneak up on my line. If you cut this too much, it's going to be too big to clamp down on the tenon, right? Well, then you just would have to face this off and start over. If you cut it too small, you can always make it too big, or that just gives you a little bit more gap in between the jaws. So I'm just going to come up, cut my dovetail now. So where it really matters that it's flat is right there. And obviously we wouldn't want any of that to touch. Well, that's true. You don't want it bottomed out, but I want to make sure that I don't have something that sticks up. Yeah, does it really matter? That's a good point. It matters if this is flat. So now I need to make sure that that is exactly flat. Oh, which it pretty much is already, but I'm just going to touch that up a little bit. And that'll clean up any fuzzies right there. So this is back to these you can hear that's not running true. So our wooden jaws accurate? They are if you are. That'll work. Okay, I don't like to have a real sharp edge there. I'll just take a little bit of sandpaper, just knock that off. I want a crisp edge. I just don't want a knife edge. I don't want to cut myself on it, so that's still crisp. If you want to sand those holes, that's fine. You know, to make it look pretty, you could do that.
Since these are wood, up every time you gotta make.
No, the my first set that I made, I've trued those up one time because they've been in and out of my tool bag and they just were getting beat up. And so I just made them look pretty. But no, they've been fine. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see if this will work. Moment of truth. So again, I like to have the gap going up and down. Do my grain up and down. Actually, let's. Okay. And so I'm looking at it right now and I can see I need to go just a little bit deeper. My bead is bottoming out right there. So I got to take this just a little bit deeper. Sorry about that. Yep.
Maybe the shoulder, maybe like put an inch with like a chamfered edge to kind of create more of a smoother
transition from your curve to your bead, into the rough corner.
No, I have not. Do a chamfer on the edge of the flat. An abrupt. My customers don't complain the way it is, so no, I haven't though. Because that would actually be another step that I'd have to take too. So again, I'm back to that mentality of a production turner. That'd be another surface I'd have to sand and all that. Yeah, the base you had on your plate had some different shoulders and stuff like that, didn't it? You haven't looked at it? You haven't been eating off of it? It... Heaven forbid you would get it dirty. Oh, man. When I win this year, Jessica, I'm gonna send you pictures and everything. Eh, I gotta say, I don't remember my plates ever making that much noise. Maybe I shouldn't have used hard maple. Or my jaws ever making that much noise. You could. This just makes it a flat surface is all. I could and get up to till I get up to the edge, yeah. Or I could do a pull cut, sure. Now, I wasn't enlarging that at all. I was just getting rid of the little bump there. And I checked and it should be flat. Let's see if that fits now. The wrench. There we go. Let's do a little bit, just checking to make sure that that's seated up flat. You can look down through the jaws and see, is it bottoming out or not? Looks all right. And I'll go ahead and tighten it down. Now, one thing I noticed already is that my recess is too big and I don't have 1/4 of an inch. So I'll show you how to check your depth without that. Okay, the next step, let's hollow out the center. We'll bring the tailstock up for support.
Here, how long is it taking you to file?
Plate hour or so, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of talking today, huh? But I got jaws made up already and I'll just whip them out. If it's gonna come off, it probably will do it as soon as you touch it with the gouge. So bring this up, take it easy. Remember, they're just wooden jaws. Let's just see what it does. So I've already got my line up there. I can see I need to remove about a 1/8 of an inch. I'll just use the big gouge again. We'll just remove some wood. Stand out of the line of fire. I'm just flattening that off a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna work on my rim a little bit, just take it down to my 1/4 inch thickness. And I'll just do a full cut. See what happens. I like to angle my rim inwards a little bit. So I'll cut a little bit deeper there. And then pull it towards me. Get right up to my line. That may not leave the best surface, so I'm going to switch to a shear straight. And I'm kind of speeding things up a little bit, so if I go too fast, let me know. And I'm just going to check, and it's angled inward. I'm at my line, so I got my 1/4 inch. So now we can start hollowing it out. 1/4 inch. 1/4 inch rim. Oh, the width of my, haven't done that yet. It's going to be 5/8. 5/8 wide. But I'll go ahead and mark that now, since I've already got my my final diameter is 10.5. What did I do with my pencil? Do you guys see my pencil? Did I drop it or did it fall? There it is. Okay, so I'm going to measure in 5/8 on my dinner plates. My I told you my dinner plates, they used to be 11 inches, so I used to make a 3/4 inch wide rim because I made the plate a little bit smaller. Now I make a little bit smaller rim. Okay, now we're going to hollow this out. So I'm gonna tell you guys, we're making a plate. We're not making a bowl. If you try and hollow this out like you do a bowl, you're probably going to go through the bottom. So the way I hollow plates out, ooh, no tailstock either. So the way I hollow plates out, I haven't even come close to coming through the bottom because I do it this way. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some, whoops, it's skating on me because I have the flute open. I'm going to make some grooves. Go with a little bit sharper tool too. A little bit rough wood there, huh? When you get close to your mark, make sure the flute is closed. If it's opened up at all, it'll skate across the rim and ruin it. Okay, now let's start hollowing it out a little bit. So we're going to take this down. So really what I'm doing is I'm taking the whole mass of the plate. I'm going to take it down in layers. So what these grooves do is they just give you a place for the tool to start, so it won't scoot back on you. So I start with the flute closed, and then I can open it up to make the cut. Hang on a second. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna come out more towards the rim, but like I said, when you get close to your mark, make sure that flute is closed. If it's closed too far, it'll scoot that way. If it's opened up just a little bit, it comes across your rim and messes it up. If you don't trust yourself that way, Jimmy Clues says you can get just a regular parting tool and just make yourself a little shoulder right there at your line. And now you have a place for the gouge to rest up against, and you avoid that chance of scooting across the rim. Okay, so I've taken it down a little bit. Let's make another layer. Okay, do it again. So now what we can do, you can come across, straight across, get rid of some of these lines, some of these marks. I'm taking some pretty heavy cuts here too. I should stop and show you. So you can see, I'm pushing pretty hard, but you can see, so the grain's going like this. So look at the tear out on the end grain, but look at the side grain. It's a lot smoother, right? A lot of times at home I wear a glove when I'm doing this because you get those little pieces come flying off, hits your hand. Okay. 900, somewhere around in there. No, I do. I can, but I never do. I always forget. Probably not a bad idea though, huh? Okay, that's pretty rough. I was just trying to get rid of wood. If I had the gap in between my jaws, that's where I would stick my calipers down. But since I didn't do that, another way to check how your depth is, if my plate is an inch tall and I want a 1/4 inch thickness all the way throughout the plate, how much should I be cutting into that? 3/4 of an inch, right? Inch tall minus the inch thickness. Let's just see what our depth is. And I'm at just a little bit over a half, so I've got maybe 3/16 to remove. You just have to trust your measurements there, right? So let's slow up a little bit, see if we can do things a little bit smoother. I'm gonna start up at the rim, make another cut. So I really, what I do is I do all those grooves and I try and take it down in like 3 layers, and then I'll come across and get rid of all the marks. And now I start fine tuning it. So I'm right up against my rim. Let's see if I can put some more of that. Now, you can hear that noise, how loud it sounds, how it just sounds like it's just tearing that end grain out. So what if we switch to our our bottom bowl gouge. Remember, this is not a roughing tool, but let's see if there's a difference in the sand. You hear any of that chipping out or anything like that? It's still, you still hear a vibration noise, but the wood likes this tool a lot better. Yeah, the tool rests a little bit high. So I was kind of pushing it there, going a little bit faster than what that I should. But where this excels, it just gives you a nice smooth surface. So let's clean that up a little bit more. I'm gonna cut on the edge here. And then I'm just gonna grab my finger across the tool rest. I got my tool rest set up parallel with the plate. I'm just gonna glide it across to maintain that depth. And I'm not pushing the tool away. I'm just gonna lean, I got it anchored against my body and I'm just gonna lean forward. And hook up while you're doing this. I can tell I'm going a little bit too shallow, but I thought I feel something. Okay, so I said that for a plate, we want this to be flat, and the way so I just have a scrap piece of wood that just has a flat edge, and I rounded the corners, and I just stick it up there and I'll check and see if it's flat. You can use your 6-inch ruler, provided it's, you got enough space right there. So I'm a little bit low there. I need to take some of this out. I can feel that bump right here. So let's just take a little bit out. Should we check our depth? Inquiring minds want to know. Oh, I'm only at 5/8, so I got a 1/8 of an inch I can go still. Okay, so we'll do this again. You might be able to see I've got some lines right there. I'm not worried about those. I'm just rubbing the bevel against the wood. It's not cutting. I'm gonna try and pick up that cut. Okay, and that comes straight across. Remember, I was deeper out here, so. Oh. Can that camera zoom in? Look at that. That's perfect. That's still at 5/8. How am I doing on time? Oh, I gotta stop. Okay, that'll be good for now. Let me show you how to clean that up. Gonna use our scraper again. So this is gonna answer Keith's question about that he asked earlier about with those wooden jaws. When I made this plate, when you make a bowl, they tell you to leave all that mass in the center while you work on the rim, right? And why do you leave that mass there in the center? For support. Is my mic still working? Oh, okay. Wood moves. Okay. They tell you to leave that mass in the center. My wood I'm going to say, I'm not going to say it can't move, but the chances of it moving are greatly reduced because I've got support almost all the way out to the rim, within an inch, inch and a quarter of the rim, that piece is supported. So, I mean, that my jaws come out to here, so I've got that much wood that's unsupported that could move. If you had and this is an advantage of the large tenon versus a recess, a lot of those, well, not, I didn't bring them, but I think I brought one plate. The guys that, I think this one. Yeah. So this is how I used to make plates, and this is how Mike Mahoney and Glenn Lucas and all, they'll make a recess that they expand their jaws into. They still have a large foot, but they expand the jaws into the recess. So now they've got this much wood that can move and flex on them. I've got that much wood that can move and flex. So there's an advantage of having large jumbo jaws. Now I haven't touched my rim. I'm going to work on this area right here. And I'm just going to use my scraper. And you wouldn't think of doing something like this on a bowl. You touch the rim, you don't ever come back to it. I can put my hand behind there if I want for support. But if I've got any tool marks right here, bevel rub marks, I'll get rid of those. If this wasn't flat, I could also use my scraper to go back and forth and scrape that flat. I forgot to, my edge of my rim is square. I like to have just a little bit of a bevel on that. You wouldn't think of doing that now if you were making a bowl. So we'll just do a shear scrape, get rid of that. So having that tenon that far out, having this wood supported allows me to do things like this. So I got a little curve there. I've taken care of that. I would flatten this up as, you know, with the gouge, or I'd use my scraper. Now, and I'm hurrying here. So now the next step would be to sand it, right? So if this isn't perfectly flat, or if you struggle with that, I said earlier that we're making a plate. And in my opinion, a plate should have a flat bottom, right? You don't want your food rolling towards the center. So the way I make sure that it's flat, I always will hand sand first. So I have a block of wood. Obviously, you can tell it's a scrap block of wood. This is flat. Then I just rounded the edges, and I stuck some 16th inch cork on it. You never want to just put sandpaper directly on a hard piece of wood. It'll just wear right through this. So it's got a little bit of a cushion, but it's not real thick, so it's not going to give. It's just providing some cushion. I've got a piece of sandpaper, 80 grit, 100 grit, whatever. Draw your little bullseye line on there. And then I sand it. I always hand sand it, no matter how flat I think it is. And this will tell you right away where it's high, where it's low. So you can see right there where it's high and where it's not touching. So this usually only takes a couple of minutes. I've rounded the edges. I don't try and necessarily sand the curve with the edges. It's just that if I come up to the edge, it's not going to be a square surface that's bumping into it. So see, I wasn't as flat as I thought I was, huh? And I can move this a little bit, try a different area of the sandpaper. I've actually used this sandpaper quite a bit. I should have bought some fresh sandpaper. For those of you in class, I have a couple of these that you can use. I'm not giving you one, but I have a couple you can use. And in the handout, I said if you want to cut a 2-inch strip of sandpaper to bring to class, to have sandpaper to use. So you can see I'm still not flat there. I'm still a little bit low in the center. Oh, yeah, sorry, you might not have been able, I could see lines. I could see where the sandpaper wasn't hitting. And, Jessica, that was another comment I made about your plate. You said you had the bottom wasn't flat, and this is how you get it flat. This is how I get it flat. If you were to just go straight to the power sander and try and use a 2-inch disc to get it flat, if you guys are better sanders than I am, good luck. But when I try and make something flat with the sanding disc, all I do is make it worse. I just get bigger ridges and I just end up dishing it out in the center and all that. This gets it flat. Once it's flat, then I can use the power sander. And now the power sander, all it has to do is just smooth out those scratches. You know, it's not trying to reshape it or to flatten anything. It's just following along, sanding that nice and easy. And I'll sand that up to 320 grit. I forgot to mention, after you sand the back, raise the grain, spray it with water, let the grain, raise the grain, sand it again. So I would sand this up to 320, spray it with water, and then hit it with the 320 grit again to remove the raised grain. Couple of differences between a plate and a platter. One is size. So platters are usually larger than let me say that again. Did I say that right? Platters, yeah, platters are larger than plates. So size. Typical dinner plate is 10 to 12 inches. I think platters start at 13 or 14 and go up from there. The foot diameter, the foot size. So if you Google the difference between a plate and a platter, it says that a platter is used for serving food and a plate is used to eat food off of. So a plate can get by with a little bit smaller foot diameter because you have food on it and you're just setting it down. People are picking food up off of it. Whereas with the plate, again, they're going to try and eat food off of the edge of it, towards the edge of it, and you want to have support under there. So that's why you have a larger foot on it. And then platters, a lot of times, are dished. They have a real shallow curve on the inside, whereas a plate is flat. So those are the three differences: overall size, foot size, and then the plate shape on the bottom. That's why you're on a flat bottom. You don't want your gravy and your peas to all roll towards the center, and heaven forbid your peas and your gravy mix, right? She wants a flat bottom. I still make a flat bottom on mine too. Oh yeah, if you have a big enough size. A serving tray. A serving tray is similar to a platter or a plate that, you know, you're bringing out cocktail drinks or whatever. That should have a flat bottom as well. You can do whatever kind of sides you want. Probably typically they would be a little bit deeper than what I've got. So maybe I'd do 1.25 inches or something, 1.5 inches overall height. But yeah, flat bottom for a serving tray as well, for a round serving tray. On his platters, he does. Yeah, so there's your difference there. Drives me nuts. So I said a typical dinner plate is 10 to 12 inches. My breakfast plates / dessert / appetizer / hors d'oeuvres are 7.5 inches. My lunch plate is 9-inch. That's a nice size for lunch. It'll hold a sandwich and chips. You can use it as a side salad for dinner. You can also use it when you're just not as hungry. The plates we eat off of every night at home are 9 inches. And then I got my full-size 10.5. Drives me nuts when I see people post stuff. Look at this nice 7.5-inch platter that I made. And it's like, you didn't make a platter, you made a plate. Well, excuse me. Well, you asked for feedback, so I just gave it to you. One guy really got mad at me. I said, how big was yours? It was walnut too, wasn't it? Yeah. I would never make a plate out of exotic wood either. I would always stick with North American hardwood. People can have some kind of a reaction to an exotic wood: sneezing, runny eyes, itching. I sure would not want to serve them food that they're going to ingest off of exotic wood that they might have some kind of reaction to inside. Yeah. Mahoney's walnut oil is because that's been polymerized, so all those nut proteins have been boiled out of it or heated out of it or whatever. Yeah.
So,
Walnut wood.
Yeah, it's 2 o'clock. Do I have time to do Odie's oil? One, two. No, I haven't. Because I've been making them for 14 years. So, oops, more than a few. If you guys want to stay late, I did bring a plate that I'll put Odie's on. Larry, you don't have to record this if you don't want. I talk too much, don't I? So this is, another glue up. I've got just one coat of Odie's on the back. I'll put some on the front. Well, it depends on which Odie's product I use. The Universal is the original formula, the thickest formula. One coat is all it takes, and you're good to go. And that's another reason why I like using it. Sorry, I can't see what I'm doing here. So they came out with the original formula. They call it the Universal, and that's real thick. It's like honey consistency, and it just takes one coat. Then they came out with a thinner version, which don't ever try and use the thick stuff on a bowl. That is just so hard to apply. On plates, I love it. On a bowl, it just wears my arm out. Then they came out with a thinner version called, I did bring new sandpaper. Then they came out with a thinner version, half the thickness of the original, and they call that super penetrating or super pen. That 1 or 2 coats. And then they came out with an even thinner version, half of the super pen, which is this super duper, which is real liquidy. And that's because that's so thin, you really should do 2 coats. So if you use the thick stuff, 1 coat, the medium, 1 or 2, and the thin, you really should do 2. Do I what? Yeah. Yeah, the difference is going to be how long do you let it sit on the surface? Really, that's it. How long do you let it sit on the surface? I'll just put that down so it doesn't. Odie's, it's a hard wax oil. It's tung oil based. I can't tell you what else is in there because I don't know. They don't share that information. You should stir it up. This you can shake, but the other stuff, just stir it with a stick. But it's food safe. It doesn't have any chemical dryers and all that kind of stuff. You can use it on wood, metal, leather, concrete, stone, brick, all kinds of stuff. Hang on, and that just happens to be, that's the only super duper I had left, which is dark oil. So over time, it'll just darken up a little bit extra patina. Super duper. What was that? Yes. This will last so much longer and protect so much better than Mahoney's. I don't use Mahoney's anymore. Mahoney's doesn't last. Somebody asked about how often do I have to re-oil my plates. Let me answer how often do I have to re-oil my bowls. And my bowls, I've been making bowls for a lot longer, and I started out using Danish oil on those. And I think in 15, 20 years, I've re-oiled my salad bowls once or twice with Danish oil. I made a bowl one time with the Mahoney's oil, and months later I had to reapply it again, and then I reapplied it again. I finally said, and I put Danish oil on it. I just got tired of reapplying the oil. It's just so much more durable. And mineral oil, don't even go there. Go ahead, Keith. The Mahoney's does it? And then you do what? A wax. Wax will still come off after you wash it. So we can talk finishing for a while. Yeah. All right. So tried and true. That's a Danish oil. Yeah. Salad bowl finish, water locks. What else? Sam Malouf. Those are all Danish oils. Danish oil is just a mixture of an oil and varnish, or oil and poly, oil and urethane, tung oil or linseed oil, It's all a different combination. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Probably 9 out of 10 finishes you go upstairs and look at, you read the ingredients, they're all a Danish oil. So yeah, Danish oil is just real durable. Okay, so I shook this up. I'm going to use a non-woven pad to apply it. A non-woven pad works so much better than just a paper towel because it'll kind of collect some of the, or, hold some of the finish. So I don't know if Larry still got the camera. Can you guys see that? How much I've put on there? Way too much. Way too much. That's enough for 25 bowls. So or plates. So let's get rid of that. That was way too much. I should have only dipped it in about 1/4 of an inch. So I've got a little bit on there. I've already sanded this. I've raised the grain. I've sanded it back. And now the key with Odie's is just keep working it in. Just keep working it in. If you, I do, because that's so quick and it's done. And then I'll use the lathe to help buff it off. Just a non-woven pad. And this one is the white one, which doesn't have any abrasive to it, but don't use a green, but if you use a maroon or a gray, that has a little bit of abrasive to it, and it's like wet sanding, if you will. You're kind of sanding as you apply it. I've got a unopened, I've got one downstairs that, geez, 6, 8 years old. They do have Bloxygen. You can put Bloxygen in it to keep that from hardening up and stuff like that. Otherwise, I don't know what the shelf life. The stuff I've got I can tell you it's years old. It'll start, I've got some that started to clump up a little bit. And at that point, just get rid of it. Or if it's starting to get too thick, they make us what they call a super solvent, super duper super solvent. The super solvent would just thin it down. So if you buy the original, the thick stuff, and it's too thick for you, you can add some of their super solvent. I want to say I've tried it, thinning it with mineral oil or mineral spirits, but I don't think it worked very well. But their super solvent is amazing. Theirs is a citrus smell, but I don't know. Again, I don't know their proprietary formula. I don't know if that would work or not. You try it, but I don't pour some into another jar before you ruin your $50 jar of Odie's. That's the thing that throws people off. This little jar, it's like $45 or $50. $60? I was going to say the other store sells them for $60, but you can buy directly from Odie's for $45 or $48 or whatever it is. And you just keep working it in. So you saw how little I had on there, and it was more than enough to cover. One of these jars, I could do 500 plates with it. This is the Odie's Dark. It just takes a little bit. And that's what I started to say. The problem that everybody will make is when you first start using it, you're going to use too much. Guaranteed you're going to use too much because you're used to using too much right now. You're used to flooding it on, and you keep flooding it on while it soaks into the pores and keep flooding it on, and now put on another coat. You don't need to do that with Odie's. So now the difference between the formulas, the super duper, they say, and you don't need to wear gloves, citrus smell and all that stuff. The super duper, because it's such a thin consistency, just leave it sitting on the surface for a few minutes before you wipe off the excess. The original formula and the super duper, you can let those sit for like up to 30 minutes, no more than an hour. And it'll just all soak in, and then you can buff off whatever hasn't. That's the only jar of dark that I've got. The original. Yeah. Buff. Helps.
Do that a couple of times. Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to do here in a minute after I'm letting it soak in for 30 seconds. Yeah. That's all I use. Yeah, either Odie's or Danish oil, just whatever I feel like. Yeah. Oh yeah. Odie's makes wax. What else do they make? Some different products. It's just different ratios of whatever their formula is. So it's all I mean, I've let that sit for 30 seconds. Now they say take a clean cloth, but this is my same one that I wipe my hands off, but just for the demo, I'm gonna wipe off any excess that hasn't soaked in. And they say to use a cloth, but we all know what happens when you use a cloth on a lathe. When you're making a plate, nothing happens, because I've tried it. For the life of me, I could not get that cloth towel to catch, to start wrapping around. Don't you guys do it. I'm just telling you, I couldn't get it to catch. So I'm using a clean cloth now, oops, other way. And now I'll just help buff it in. And like Steve was saying, I use some of that heat to help dry it. Just keep changing your, different spot on your cloth. And I don't know, you probably can't see. So, I mean, you can go to their website and read all about it and how it bonds molecularly with the wood and, stuff like that. No matter which viscosity you use, the original, the super penetrating, or the super duper, after you get done applying your last coat, whether that's 1 or 2 coats, you got to let it sit and finish curing for like 3 to 5 days before you use it, before you wash it. Otherwise, you just wash the finish off. And once you've let it sit for 3 to 5 days, then it's good to go and you're ready to use it. I made a plate one time and I put Odie's on it and I used it that night. I said, what do they know? Let me give it a try. Washed right off. So you don't have to resand it or anything. You can just reapply it, let it sit for a few days. And they're all those different finishes are all compatible with each other. So I could start off with a super duper, and then if I wanted to use the super penetrating or the universal as my second coat, I could do that. I could do it the other way around, just any combination. They all will bond with each other. And it's not like you're building up layers, because one layer just works its way into the other, or however they describe it. But when you get all done, it should be dry to the touch. So that's why I like Odie's, because it's so fast. Danish oil now, I put on 1 coat and I have to, the smell, you got to let that smell cure for days. So I could put wax on it if I wanted after that set. If I was going to put a second coat, I'd let that sit for like 24 hours. You're welcome. There's another one. No, there's not. Yeah, if I was going to put a second coat on, I'd just let it sit overnight and then I put a second coat on it. Keith. Wax is a top coat. It's not a finish. Yeah. So wax will wash off. It just is not a long lasting finish. And that's my thing with it. That's like, nope. You can if you want. I've got some Odie's wax I've tried, but no, I just a straight Odie's. This or Danish oil. And I make my own Danish oil, so I'd probably use Odie's. Oh yeah, because it's got that citrus smell. You open up the lid and you'll be able to smell it. It's real easy to apply. But you got your wax that you make too, with your cherry and peach and all that. So that's pretty good stuff too. Did I give you some of mine too? I use tongue oil. I use tongue oil and odorless mineral spirits.